Listen, having a degree and knowing what date it is are two very different animals.
I'll have you know, anytime I'm in a situation where like I'm frustrated by something that I should know, I will just mutter to myself, "You have a degree." Like if like oh my god, I was trying to open up a cookie. It was like very like weirdly packaged, and I just like got out scissors. Like, "You have a degree. Like, why are you struggling with this? Like, you went to a college, a real one, not one that like packs up in the night like a Romani camp. Like, you went to an actual university, and you have a degree. Welcome to the Yaoi Shelf.
Welcome.
Grab a seat and relax."
Yeah.
Feelings
Are
that
you
yes.
are you feeling relaxed?
I have to go get my flu shot after this, so
Oh.
no. Also, I went to go bend and pick something up last night and messed up my shoulder. Um, I don't. If this is getting old, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I feel a lot.
If this is getting old, like I literally just went to pick something up and like fucked up my shoulder worse than Sosuke did. Like, if this is what getting older is, I've had a good run. Bye.
Yeah, right? No, but like listen, yesterday was a doozy, okay? Because I woke up and I let Sansa out of the window and there was slush on the porch.
Yes.
And then he came back in and it was snowing. And I was
Yeah.
like, fuck this. And then I went to meet with my friend at the bus stop. Like, we normally go for like a walk before hanging out on Saturdays, but then
Mhm.
we like the weather was awful. So we were just like, okay, we're going to the store and we're going back. And he was like, yeah, I can't walk very much today because I helped my uncle carry firewood the other day and my legs are fucked up. Like, this is age. This is what it is.
I
You do
also
one chore.
I also forget occasionally that you do live like in a place that has like actual like Arctic winter, because whenever you do, it always just sounds like some weird Game of Thrones shit where it's like, oh, he was gathering fire with like a fucking like Viking Norseman.
Technically he is because that's what we are.
Yeah, but like just for whatever reason, I can't fathom it like in a modern context. It immediately just becomes like helmets with horns and
Yeah.
like deer pelts and great axes. And I know all of that is anachronistic and not true, but like when you say that, that's what my brain goes to.
I don't blame you. But it's like, and it's completely, it was snowing and everything was awful. And then today I was still in bed because I didn't want to get up because it's cold. And for some reason my front door was unlocked because apparently I just didn't lock it last night, which good job me. And then my dad bursts in and he's like, "Are you awake?" Because I have like a storage, and like in my storage is the faucet that controls the outdoor water for the hoses outside. So he needed me to turn the faucet off because now it will get cold, and if it freezes in the pipes, then everything just goes to hell. Like they implode or explode or something because of the ice. Welcome to Norway.
Texas cackling.
It's free.
Cackles and Texan.
You want some? Do you want to
No.
trade? Like, this
No.
is wild.
We had freezing temperatures a couple of years ago, and literally a bunch of people died
Yeah,
because our
I
electrical grid
remember.
failed.
Yeah.
So no, you can keep it. We're not ready. It
I'm
finally
not
cooled
ready.
down here, hence why I'm drinking an iced coffee out of a mason jar
It's
with
very cute. It's very
thank
cute.
you. Thank you. It is October. We're here to talk
Woo!
about our favorite thing, a thing that we end up talking about every episode, really, which is villains and why we want to fuck them.
Or why we want them to fuck other characters or each other.
A lot of that, yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of that as well. Just very fuckable villains. Um,
Yeah.
this is again something that I feel like we talk about every episode because Carola and I are both certified villain fuckers. I know,
I
right?
carry that title with pride.
And it's funny because I started thinking about this. I've been a villain fucker since I was like a child. Like
Really?
ever since I was little, I have always been attracted to villains. Like, starting early on with like Vegeta and Seto Kaiba, which there's no connection there at all. No reason to dig deeper into that. There's nothing at all that will string all of the horrible men I'd like to sleep with together. Do not investigate this further.
I just want to point out that when you say, stringing all of those terrible men together, I mean, that sounds kind of kinky.
But I'm also so like one thing that I'm in love with is thinking about like the logistics of that kind of stuff happening. Because you guys probably can't see it, but right up here at the top of my heart shelf, I have Shishomaru and Moroku Nindos from Inuyasha. And they're side by side because I'm grouping like with like. And then most of the times with my Nindos, they're a couple. So like Hawks is going to go over here where Dobby is because they're married. Tamaki and Kyoya, that is my ring light, are over here. I am a professional, are over here because they're married. So Shishomaru and Moroku are together because they're from the same series. And I spent literally days thinking about a scenario in which those two men would fuck, and it broke my brain because one, they barely know each other, and two, the only context that they do know each other is in wanting to kill each other. So, like,
it's nothing more homoerotic than wanting to kill each other.
It's very homoerotic. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, that was my ring light that decided to make an appearance. I'm a professional. So we're here to talk about that. I'm very, very excited. This is the part of the show where we shill for Patreon because, Carola, these videos are what?
Very, very, very demonetized. Especially this one, I think, with this title.
I can't say especially this one because I think it's in the writing BL episode, we talk about like prostate milking and stuff. I can't say especially this one when there's hours of footage of us discussing the most lurid sexual acts between questionable fictional men, including an hour and a half of me straight up reading Omegaverse.
But that was for Patreon. So
that was for Patreon.
The things we do for Patreon.
The things we do for Patreon. Yeah, the things we do for Patreon. If that allures you in any way, sign up for Patreon. Also, I set a goal for Patreon saying if we got over $1 amount, I would watch Ken Porsche, and we did that. And then promptly, the dollar amount went back to where it was, and I'm upset with you. You all have tricked me, but I will still watch Ken Porsche.
Yes! Yes!
I'm upset. You were over a certain dollar amount, and I was very, very happy, and I was willing to
I saw that because I logged
that
in.
Dollar amount reverted. Shame on you, but I will watch Ken Porsche.
Yes! That will be next month's Patreon. I'm very excited.
That's next week's Patreon.
What? Isn't it Fujin Brain Rot?
No.
What?
We have a calendar for it. No.
But okay, we can talk. What? But I thought it was for the Fujin Brain Rot episode.
It is for Patreon. We'll figure it out. Okay. So these videos are demonetized, and we thank our patrons, and we will thank them properly at the end of the episode, which I've been neglecting, mostly because these episodes go on for almost 2 hours, and I'm usually tired.
Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. So we are here to talk about villains and why we want to fuck them and why they want to fuck the main character.
Yes.
Firstly, we're going to end up talking a lot about shonen, aren't we?
Yeah.
So there is a big reason for that. One is because that is both of our base, because both of us are 15-year-old boys.
Accurate.
Mostly because one, that is our base. Also because shonen usually has higher stakes in a series. Not that there aren't villains in shoujo. We just saw that was Jean-Baptiste.
Jean-Baptiste aside, every time someone says villain in shoujo, I just think of Sae from Peach Girl, and I want to throw myself into traffic. I hate her.
I think of George from Paradise Kiss.
He's not a villain.
He is not?
He is not a villain.
Not?
No.
Mm.
He is a Prince Charming, and I love him.
He's a sex pest who's trying to ruin Yukari.
I will die for that bisexual fashionista.
I mean, I love him too, but I'm just saying he's not the good guy of the series. Otherwise, the villain of Paradise Kiss is societal expectations.
And Yukari's mom,
I think she makes some good points.
she hits her child.
I said she makes some good points. She's a good person. I didn't say she's a. I mean, she's in the Sakurako camp of excellent parenting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like,
she makes some good points. Not she's a good mom.
She's in some parenting group with Sakurako somewhere.
Sakurako being held by Yoshiki Kitazawa.
Oh my god.
So we're going to talk a lot about shonen because there's typically bigger stakes in these stories. And thus, with bigger stakes comes bigger, more bombastic villains. Also, there is nothing more homoerotic than shonen.
Yeah.
There's a reason, and we will talk about this a lot in the Fujin Brain Rot episode next month, that why shonen series are so particularly ripe with queer ships. It tends to happen a lot with these series that are mostly male and where the females are usually useless. Naruto. I mean, really any shonen. But all of your main actors and players are male. And they all have spent an exorbitant amount of time together. They're all the ones doing the moving and the shaking. Of course, there's going to be people that can find queer subtext in it. Also, usually all the biggest and most important relationships in these stories are between two men. I remember seeing this a lot during like the early stages of the MCU with Thor and Loki, where even though Thor has like a in canon dumb girlfriend who's played by Natalie Portman, who is
Natalie Portman.
Well, no, I say dumb girlfriend is in the character. Natalie Portman is gorgeous and she's doing her best. But like
she's everything.
Yeah, but Jane Foster, character, dumb girlfriend.
Fair.
But like
even though she's like a scientist or something,
they do her dirty until literally Thor: Love and Thunder, which is why Natalie Portman noped out of the series after from the Thor: The Dark World, literally to Endgame. She was so done being this like dumb sock puppet that she just like yoinked herself out of the series and like cut her contract until a brief cameo in Endgame, and then Thor: Love and Thunder, which was directed by Taika Waititi. I know too much about too many things. So you see this with Thor and Loki, where like there's a scene where they're just like doing full Shakespeare in the park, like grabbing each other's faces, like "You're my brother, I love you," and it's just like, yeah, of course people see queer subtext in this. Like, I don't have any siblings, but I can't imagine y'all talk like this.
No.
Where he's just like grabbing Loki's face, just like, "You are my brother, you are the chosen one, you're supposed to be." It's like, that's not how straight people talk to each other, is it? It's
I mean, granted, I don't know a lot about straight people.
Yeah,
I don't know what they do.
I don't examine straight people very frequently. But like, I don't think that's how y'all do it. I mean, I don't have siblings, but like,
I have siblings, and we don't talk to each other like that.
So
no,
there's a reason why a lot of the character examples that we're going to bring up are shonen. There are, of course, villains in BL that really could have its entire own episode, and we'll probably spend a lot of time talking about that in our live.
Yes.
Where I am dressed as one of the greatest BL villains.
And I will be a sweet, sweet cinnamon roll victim of said villain.
Toma never directly lays hands on Suichi, except for an EX where he locks him in a cage.
Not directly, no, but you know, he shipped him off to New York and called him a tumor, and
he never he has never directly laid hands on Suichi. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh my god.
I'm the Reverend Al Sharpton for problematic men. I do say he never laid his hands on Suichi directly. Also, a
Dear
lot of
God.
the characters, also a lot of characters didn't make it on our list because they are precious Meow Mouse who did nothing. We're
Yeah.
going to talk about villain denial because we have to talk about reality versus fiction. Unfortunately,
I I stand by what that tweet said.
they're just precious. I mean, honestly, and that's why we're going to talk about it because I'm so in love with like villain denial, at least like in old fandom. I'm gatekeeper. Amanda sounds like a gatekeeper 15 minutes in. But especially like in old fandom where like we're not dumb and we acknowledge that villains are still villains and are doing villain things. But that's why we have to talk about reality versus fiction because now the kids are very concerned that we like villains because we want to one do what the villain is doing.
Does anyone actually want to do that though?
We're going to talk about that.
I'm so tired. We do
So,
nothing else. Yeah, no.
So, Carola, would you like to help the audience explain the difference between a villain, an antagonist, and a rival? Because those three things get conflated a lot.
Yes. Which is also why I found myself struggling with what we will get into later because a villain isn't always a villain.
Right.
Okay? And no, okay, so a villain typically means someone who is, evil, who does
Yes.
bad things, who maybe runs an organization known as the League of Villains, where it's kind of hard to deny their villainness, even though sometimes they have their reasons, you
Yeah,
know?
and sometimes they're just right.
Maybe. And yeah, but we'll get into that. But yeah, a
Jump the
villain,
part.
like villains tend to be like kind of like this black and white idea. And I think that especially like you say, like in older fandoms and older franchises, that is
Mm-hmm.
much more like they have a much more clear like there's a much more clear boundary between
Mm-hmm.
villain and hero. And for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, like Lex Luthor comes to mind, and I don't know anything about Superman, but
I
villains.
I know a lot about Lex Luthor.
I know you do. Maybe that's why I thought of him. But like there are traditional villains, right?
Yeah.
But then an antagonist doesn't have to be like straight out evil or
Mm-hmm.
mean. Like the
Mm-hmm.
antagonist is basically like the antithesis to the protagonist. Like maybe
Yeah.
the protagonist thinks that this person is terrible because they, especially if you look at like contemporary fiction and
Mm-hmm.
like or shoujo manga or
Mm-hmm.
even like BL, someone said something to you in high school and you're
Mm-hmm.
just like, this dude is such a mean girl, and so he's the antagonist of the story because you don't like him. Doesn't mean that
Okay.
he's mean, you just don't like him.
There is something so iconic about you dressed as gay club Freddy Krueger talking about someone being a mean girl.
I am not dressed as Freddy Krueger. I'm not even wearing one of my 4 Freddy Krueger shirts today, okay? I'm just wearing a warm sweater, Amanda.
And Arrival.
An arrival, in shonen terms, is usually
Yes.
just someone you really want to fuck. But no, but like arrival, you don't necessarily always get along with them.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like your classmate, or they're someone you've been
Mhm.
pitted up against, especially in shonen, right? Since
Mhm.
childhood, because
Mhm.
like you make each other stronger. The
Mhm.
rivalry motivates you
Mhm.
to get better or get
Mhm.
stronger or get
Mhm.
gayer, I suppose. So, and
So
sometimes the rival makes stupid choices that leads them into villain territory, even though they're not a villain. I'm looking at you, Saskia.
so I was actually literally going to break this down in Naruto terms. So
Yeah.
so for Naruto, your rival is Sasuke
Yeah.
because while he and Naruto both have very, very similar backgrounds, they have key varying differences that challenge each other and make each other grow. The end goal being that both of them take something from each other. In this case, their virginities and arms.
Yes.
Um, Your
I was about to
antagonist,
say.
their virginities and arms. Your antagonist in this particular example that I'm using would be someone like Gara, who also has a very, very similar past to Naruto,
Mm,
but radically challenges how someone like Naruto could view the world, usually with the goal of changing the antagonist's mind. So Gara comes in, who really is the dark foil of Naruto. Naruto
mm,
very easily could be and rationally should be someone a lot more like early like tuning exams Gara,
mm.
and through the power of friendship and bullshit Gara, changes and become. Is that not what happens?
It's the power of shonen friendship.
It's the
Listen,
power of bullshit friendship and Shikamaru fucking the hell out of Tamari that gets him to chill out.
so cynical. So cynical. Don't look at me like
I will.
that.
I'm wearing 15 inches of makeup. I will look at you however I want. Um, and then your villain would be someone like Orochimaru
Mm.
until you learn that really he was just a misunderstood guy who made some good points and he was actively villainized and ostracized by his two best friends who wanted to fuck each other.
I guess.
But as of tuning exams, he's just this all
Yeah.
encompassing evil that is so hard to understand. You don't get it. You don't know why his motivations are his motivations. He is just here to be awful. He is literally just like how the Grinch stole Christmas. He's just in his like mountain of bullshit, just hating on everyone, and you don't know why. Later, you learn why, and we'll talk about villain redemption, I guess. I don't want to.
You make it sound like you don't like villain redemption.
I don't. I think it's a pissy move. Let villains be villains. Hashtag let villains be villains.
Looking
Insert
at Disney.
looking at Million Knives.
Again, I cannot speak to that because I
We're going
don't know
to talk
anything.
about my beloved Nye. So, those are the differences. Now, Carola brought up Disney, which is something
Why?
that queer people love.
We
because
do.
because we all want to be the pretty princess.
Really?
Just kidding. That was mostly because it's musical and bright, and some of the best Disney movies were written by gay men.
True.
Look it up. Look at like The Little Mermaid. There's a reason why we love Ursula. She's literally based off of a drag queen. There's a reason why the gays love Ursula. She's one of us. She's literally one of us.
And so are a lot of the villains.
Right. And a lot of villains, especially in Disney, are very queer coded. They're effeminate, they're theatrical, they're larger than life. I remember as a kid, one of my favorite Disney movies was The Great Mouse Detective.
Mm.
And I loved Radigan. He has this whole like 3-minute song just about
That
like adoring
song
his
is
and just like waxing philosophic about his brilliant big criminal brain. I loved that movie as a kid, which should make all of this make sense. None of this should be a shock to anyone. That I watched Anastasia done by Don Bluth and was not horrified by Rasputin. I was like, this is a drag queen and I stan. In the Dark of the Night is an amazing number.
I'm one of these bad gays who haven't. I think I've seen Anastasia like 3 times in my life, and I watched it once growing up, and then I actually saw it again a couple of years ago. So I don't have that strong, I
I'm
don't have that strong
sorry.
bond to it. My
I'm
my
sorry.
favorite character was the Bat.
Well, yeah, because it's Hank Azaria. There's Kirsten Dunst and Meg Ryan, John Cusack, Christopher Lloyd as Grigori Rasputin. Fucking Kelsey Grammer is there for some reason. I love Anastasia. I
But
could
you
talk
gotta
about
remember, when I saw it as a kid, it was dubbed in Norwegian,
that. Sounds like hell.
and I can't remember what that was like.
That sounds like
A lot of
actual hell.
a lot of people I know really, really love it. I just don't have
Okay. That's the next Patreon. We're actually just going to watch a bunch of Disney movies.
But
So
Anastasia's not Disney.
it's Don Bluth. You're correct. But like Minister Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Must we go back here? Why can't we talk about Jafar?
Because I don't. They're the same character.
No, I would much rather have Jafar than Judge Frollo. Thank you.
I don't want to fuck Frollo, but that is a gay man.
You did in the Fuck Marry Kill Patreon
Oh right,
special,
I did.
as I recall.
Why do you remember that? Okay,
Because I was so fucking calm.
why do you remember that? Okay, there is a version of me that would probably lay down with Frollo, but like Disney has a really, really bad habit of queer coding a lot of their villains, and there's a reason for that. It's this little thing called the Hays Code, and the Hays Code was designed to give like morality to especially movies, because the Hays Code was written at a time where movies were like this new burgeoning concept, and it's like, well, we have to teach kids morality, and if we show villains being like sexy and right, they're gonna think bad things. You can think of it like the Comics Code Authority, where in comics during a certain time you couldn't show direct types of violence, you couldn't show certain acts being done. Heroes always had to side with America. It's why some of them end up being so jingoistic. So you can think of the Hays Code and the comic book authority very, very similarly. And one of the big tenets of the Hays Code was neutering villains. So you start to see this trend of ascribing villains to be effeminate, to be dramatic, to be very, very overtly queer coded. The Maltese Falcon comes to mind, where your villain is just this sniveling, effeminate, weak man in comparison to the hero who's big, strong, and macho and loves America. But you see that especially in children's media, because even after the Hays Code was no longer concerned, those habits die hard, and they also reinforce a lot of things that people are trying to say about various outgroups. There is power in attaching these tropes to queer-coded characters. Now, Disney is an interesting example, because for as much as, I'm not going to be subtle, as much as they want us to attach these negative tropes to characters, it ended up backfiring, because it was the 1980s and 1990s, and the water had gay beams in it. So all the children ended up queer because of the hormones in the milk. So we saw this and we're just like, this is iconic.
Yep. And now look at us.
You know, we saw this and we weren't like, this villain is effeminate. We're like, this is a girl boss slay. Wherever the 1990s analogous term of that is.
I don't know.
It was rad.
Rad. What that is an incredibly straight term, I feel.
Yeah, remember, homosexuality didn't exist until after RuPaul. So
this is true.
You know, it was invented as a television trope. But like we didn't see it that way. We didn't see that. Our parents did, which is why there was a lot of early like parent panic over, why are all of my kids only liking the worst guy in this movie? Because I know like my school had that, where like there was one. Oh yeah, I went to this like tiny private school, and like Halloween, all we wanted to be were like villains, and it's like, why do all of our kids just want to be bad guys? It's like, because they're cool. Look at that outfit. He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
I mean, obviously, I'm coming from, you know, a country with far fewer moral panics than the US, so I don't think that was a major concern. But you know, again, it's like, it's kind of like the villains, because obviously they had style and they had flair and they had awesome song numbers.
Yeah,
you know, like I was never one for. First of all, I never liked the princess movies. I only liked, when I was a kid, I hated ballads, I hated love stories, and I only liked the Disney movies that were about animals. and then I had to kind of grow into it.
What weird, cynical child were you?
I know,
What?
right? But
What?
but I was also, and I think that this is so funny because when you say that you were always a villain fucker, and I was like, I think I was an incredibly just child up until a point, and then
Mhm.
something just changed, and now I love villains, and I don't know when that changed because I remember being very like, oh, they have to get rid of the bad guy. Except, I did tell you about how my cousin and I we used to play that we were villains, and then we were just like, we were so evil that the world just imploded and then everything became black, and we would like turn out the lights and sit in the dark in my room and laugh like evil laughter, and then my mom would come in and then she would be like, what are you doing? And we're like, we're being villains. Like, so maybe I had it in me all along.
You're such a dork. I love you.
I was, I was like 9,
You're
but
such, you're such a fucking weirdo.
I don't even know what
such,
that was.
you're such a
But
fucking weirdo.
that's why you wanted me on this podcast.
I
That's
mean,
the
it
only
is.
thing I
It
can
is.
bring to the table.
You're such
I'm a
a.
weirdo. No, but but I think, I I don't know. I have a very different relationship to villains now than when I was a child. But
Mhm.
but you know, but they are, they're enigmatic.
They are.
They have charisma, they have the great dance numbers. It's kind of hard to
Right.
resist them. Contrary to what popular culture or, popular beliefs about popular culture wants you to
Mhm.
believe today, it would be very boring if there were no villains and no antagonists and no
Right.
plot.
And one of the things that I think is most interesting about it is you're right. Like, objectively, the villains are usually the ones that get to have the most fun.
Mm,
They're the ones with the fancy, flashy outfits. They're the ones with the amazing big song numbers. I mean, you talked about, Disney villains. When you think about the big, bombastic, like, songs, yeah, of course, the princess got one or two. The villain almost always got the best one. It's one of the reasons why I hate modern Disney. One, there are no objective villains anymore. And
there are no
two,
songs anymore.
yeah, there also just not any good songs. I don't want to listen to Shiny in Moana. That's not the best song in that movie.
If I have to hear Let It Go one more time, I am going to murder myself.
So, fun fact, I processed Let It Go like with visceral hatred until I realized that it's just defying gravity from Wicked.
Hmm.
It's cold theme defying gravity down to it being Idina Menzel. Um, so I think when I started processing it like that like, yeah, it's still overplayed and I hate it, but it's just child version defying gravity.
Hmm. But also,
What was that
again,
judgmental Norse noise?
no, because I don't know the other song either. But here's the thing. I haven't really heard it that much. Like, I haven't heard Let It Go that many times. I haven't watched the movie because I don't like Pixar movies. Sue me.
It's not
And
hard.
And yes, it is. It's a Disney Pixar movie. I don't like it. I don't like how they all look the same with their round little heads. I don't know. But
Okay.
you see the Norwegian film, right? Because Norwegians love Frozen because
It's set in
it
Norway.
yeah. And the Norwegian version of Let It Go is ungrammatical. Like, when they translated it, I don't know what they did, but it is literally ungrammatical. You can't say it like that. It drives me absolutely insane. And somehow the entire fucking country seems to have forgotten this, and I hate it. So, I hate it from a grammatical perspective.
Okay.
You
Okay.
don't
Girl,
understand.
I
I am
don't.
about to become a villain.
I don't. You're correct. Uh, but that's why a lot of villains end up being queer coded. And I think the amazing thing is that, yeah, it really is like this interesting, like, generational, like, a litmus test, because I know, like, my aunts were concerned about that shit. Like, why are all the villains so fashionable and cool? And then by the time it gets to like us, I remember so this is gonna be radically weird from coming to you in a secular country. So during Easter, Various like cable networks will play versions of like the Jesus Christ story.
Mm-hmm.
Can I help you? Can I help you? Uh,
No, it's fine.
that usually ends with like some version of like the crucifixion. Like this is on like this isn't state television, but this is like on regular TV channels. And I remember watching this with my parents, and there's one particular one where they get to the temptation of Christ. So Jesus is in the desert and Satan is tempting him because this is right before he gets crucified. And Satan literally drives on the sand in like a sports car.
Oh,
Like
you've
it's meant to
mentioned
be
this.
anachronistic. And he like pops out. He's in like this beautiful Armani suit in red and black. Every place he steps, there's a red carpet, and he's tempting Jesus. And I remember looking at my mom and being like, "Why are we worshiping Jesus? Satan is cool." Like, you have given me the wrong message. That guy is wearing a dress in the sand. This guy has a fucking Lamborghini and is hot. Like, I don't know why we're worshiping this loser. And of course, my parents horrified.
Oh my god.
And I'm just like, why do we keep rushing this? Why do we keep worshiping this nerd out in the desert? Satan has a sports car before they were invented.
But isn't that interesting though? Because isn't, that's just it.
Yeah.
The villains are supposed, like if you look at the villains from a biblical view, then it's about
Yeah.
temptation. It's about
Yeah.
leading someone astray. And
Right.
to do that, you need to be alluring. You need to be a little sexy.
And they usually are.
And they are.
And increasingly, villains are just correct. Some of them make very, very good points. I mean, you talked about the League of Villains to start with, which I appreciate. It's Mr. Compress's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Compress.
That very old man who's literally the same age as most of the professional heroes, but everyone goes out of their way to call him an old man.
You seem a little bit tense about this.
It's one of the few things that drives me absolutely batshit. I mean, one of the few things. There's a lot of things that drive me batshit about My Hero Academia. That's a fucking lie. But it's one of those things that like everyone calls him so old. I guess because in comparison to the rest of the league, he is old. But like he's like 31, 32. He's the same age as like Aizawa, Midnight, Present Mike. Like he's the same age as a lot of characters.
Can we just end the trend of calling people old just because they're in their 30s? Like, I know I feel fucking ancient, but
yeah,
like,
I feel old as the hills. But yeah, like I guess it's because like the relative youth of the league, which are mostly people in their 20s, that Compress in his 30s is this geriatric old fossil. When they have literal Jiren who's like 50 to 60 years old. Sure, Compress is the old man.
I don't know.
I don't have strong feelings about this. Justice for Compress. Love that weird, fanciful magician. But oftentimes also the villains are just correct. They're often poorly maligned. One of the biggest things that I think is frustrating to me looking at a narrative like My Hero Academia is that, yeah, everyone that's in the League of Villains are people who don't pass a normal society. It's X-Men all over again. It's this very, very powerful metaphor of course, the heroes that are in this mainline mainstream acceptability are the ones that can pass as mostly human or are thought to have quirks that are the most beneficial to maintaining the status quo. The ones that aren't are the ones that are considered to be lesser, to be degraded, and to be villainous, thus having their rights, abilities, and a lot of the times their autonomy stripped from them. We see that with the subjugation of a character like Hawks, who is one of the most non-baseline heroes, but is molded extensively under the Hero and Public Safety Commission. I haven't thought a lot about My Hero Academia. Shut up.
Not at all.
But it's X-Men. It's all it is X-Men.
But you're right.
Like, I that honestly that made that series so much more palatable to me because when it started doing all the things that disappointed me in X-Men, then I was able to rationalize it other than it just being like there's a great failing of anime. It's just shitty X-Men. It's just shitty X-Men. That's all it is. But you see these characters who are just maligned by society
Mhm.
who really do deserve a chance to be part of it and are denied that because they don't fit in. A
Mm.
lot of the villains in the LOV are just maligned teenagers. Except for Shigaraki.
Why do you have to bring Shigaraki had a very, very hard childhood and
Yeah, because his quirk is awful.
but it's not his fault. It wasn't like
I
he
didn't say
wanted.
it was his fault. I'm just
No,
saying it's bad. People are like, oh, he's dangerous because he is. What do you mean?
like they could have treated. I don't know.
They did
I
the
don't
same
know.
thing to Rogue and she turned out mostly okay.
Yeah, but she had Professor X. I don't know how they could fail Shigaraki so terribly.
He had
He's
a
a
he had
poor boy.
AFO. He had
Oh
AFO.
God.
Don't sit here and say he didn't have a mentor. He had one.
Not the best mentor. Like, but that is exactly it because it does depend, who is your mentor? Who takes care of
Right.
you? Does anyone take
Right.
care of you?
Right.
How are you met under the circumstances, And it's like,
Right.
if you look at Magneto, like he's a perfect example, right? Because he's the villain, but he does have a lot of good points. And it's
Right.
like this is the kind of thing that happens. And again, with X-Men in particular being very much code for being queer.
Yeah,
That
being queer, being different. I mean, Magneto
yeah,
is an amazing example of that because he's canonically a Holocaust survivor.
yeah,
So
exactly.
being Jewish, which was a huge part of the comic book
Yeah,
creators'
like
history.
being the other, being
Yes.
the other who is often
Yeah.
considered to be, an outsider and a potential threat,
Mm-hmm.
and how you are met and how society looks at those
Mm-hmm.
attributes
Mm-hmm.
can change so much in how you view society in turn and how you interact with that society.
Absolutely. And I think, again, like Magneto is a great example because he is meant to be this really, really strong foil to Charles Xavier, who, much like with the conflict between like the Hero Public Safety Commission and the League of Villains, has mostly all of these very baseline mutants, and the ones that aren't baseline are bootlickers. I just call Beast a bootlicker. I mean, he is. He's a war criminal and a bootlicker.
Yeah.
Beast is a shill. I'm not lying. But like, so even the ones that are the least baseline are still conforming
Mm.
to society. You don't have to learn anything about appreciating Beast. He's doing everything he can to be palatable. I mean,
Yeah.
so RuPaul's Drag Race has this problem with a lot of the African American queens where they're by the narrative listed as villains. And there's one queen from season 4. Her name is Latrice Royale. She's amazing. She's a fantastic drag queen. But like when white fans are confronted with their racism in RuPaul's Drag Race, Latrice Royale is always the one they say, oh, I love Latrice. Latrice is essentially a mammy in the
Mm.
narrative of RuPaul's Drag Race. She's a large, comforting black woman who everyone can go to for advice. She's a mammy. So when
Mm.
white fans are trying to assuage their guilt and say, I'm not racist, I love Latrice, of course you love Latrice. Latrice is Aunt Jemima in drag. Of course you love her. It's
Ah.
impossible not to love her. So Beast is a very, very similar story to that, where it's like, oh, well, we understand mutants. We have Angel and Beast and Cyclops. And it's like, yeah, those are all bootlickers.
I personally hate Cyclops, but
I mean, yeah, I'm here to bash Cyclops 100%. Fuck him. When the challenging thing would be to see someone like Magneto and meet him where he's at,
Mm.
who is a Holocaust survivor, and make some very, very good points about separating these societies because clearly humans can't be trusted.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing about villains. There's usually a part where they go a little too far because unfortunately, that old specter of the Hays Code comes back where villains can't just be right.
No.
One of the biggest issues that happened in Black Panther with Killmonger, where Killmonger is very openly like, oh, well, I know of a world where African Americans are subjugated. If we gave them the resources that Wakandans have, then there would not be racism. That's
Mm.
just correct. Now he takes it too far and wants to start a race war. Okay, now we have to put him down like Old Yeller. we draw the line at you wanting to start a race war.
Oh, Killmonger. Why? I loved you. What? But that is precisely why.
Yeah,
If I love someone, they die. That is how it works.
I mean, I didn't love him. I felt that he was very like correct. Hello, Sansa. You heard us talk about villains. Like
He is
I
a
thought
villain.
he is. I just thought he was correct. I was like, yeah, he's making good points. Like, yeah, he's right. Like when he has the whole opening spiel about like, the British Museum, it's like, oh, where did you guys get this from?
Mm.
Like he's just right. Like it's so hard to see him as a villain until he has to be demonstrably bad where he's just shooting people and it's like, oh that's why. Okay. You gave him a gun and now he wants a race war. Fuck. But he's just right for 90% of the movie. And that's something that is very, very interesting about why villains are so interesting, especially in
Yeah.
fiction, is that there's a lot that we can see ourselves in. They are usually very, very powerful metaphorical stand-ins. And I think especially to think about like when most of us became villain fuckers, either you were like me and you were corrupted from childhood, but I can promise you
Because Satan had a sports car.
Satan had a fucking sports car. Why did they give him a sports car? It can't drive on sand.
But he's Satan. I guess
Yeah.
he made it work somehow.
He did. But I can promise you, most of us became villain fuckers when we were in high school.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
When we felt our most alienated and our most different, and we felt the most that society was against us.
Good points.
I think about these things sometimes. And what's amazing is now when I look at the villains that I still really closely attach myself to, a lot of them have very, very similar parallels to villains that I've liked since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So like I had that actually with Dobby, where like I was like, why do I like him so much? He's just Eric from Phantom of the Opera. He's just this maligned, disfigured person who has rationally a very strong hatred of society that shunned him. In this case, society being his dad, but society. Also, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I didn't put up a spoiler warning because none of you guys need it. When everyone was so shocked that he was a Todoroki, was just like, how are all of you stupid?
Hi. Yes.
Fuck you. I didn't even know My Hero Academia, and I looked at him like, is he related to Endeavor? Like, I didn't even know this series. I saw like a plushie of them like side by side, and I'm like, oh, that's the same guy.
But I think, I don't think I paid much attention because obviously, as we all know, I have lived in my own little corner of Hero Academia. We will talk about that next month.
The message I received when he finally pours water over his head and reveals his shock right there. And suddenly everyone realizes that he is Toya Todoroki. The message that I got from Carola, and I'm just like, yeah, bitch.
I was just like screaming in caps lock, and I was like, dude,
how long have you known? It's like, why haven't you known?
And I was like, the thing is, literally the 5 minutes before it happened, it finally clicked. And then he poured the water. I was like, oh my God.
And I'm over here. I'm barely even in this series. I'm looking at Dobby. I'm like, I want to fuck. And I'm like, I wonder if he's related to Endeavor. I wonder if literally the only other fire user with blue eyes has anything to do with this.
I have no idea what I've been doing. No, but in my defense,
please,
I don't care about Endeavor. he's a big bulky daddy, and I don't really like those, so haven't really paid much attention to
I
him.
do.
And then Tamaki existed, so I was
That's right.
over
So you
there.
just weren't paying attention, and then suddenly the most obvious thing reveals itself, and it's like, oh fuck!
I was just I was off screen with Tamaki in a corner. I just
Right,
had
and then like
no
the
idea.
most obvious thing happens, and Carola messages me like in all caps, like, "How long have you known?" It's like
I was I was
forever.
shooketh. It
But like,
was
he's
oh my
literally
god.
just Eric. He's just Eric from Phantom of the Opera. And guess what? I love Eric from Phantom of the Opera. So of
But
course I love that weird arsonist.
of course. But then of course another thing, in addition to us being in our teens and being, feeling
Mhm.
alienated on the
Mhm.
outside of ourselves, and everything
Mhm.
is weird, we also start thinking, at least hopefully, at the world more critically, and you realize that things aren't as black and white, because especially if you
Mhm.
were like a child, like the kind of kid that I was, apart from when I was
Mhm.
playing horrible villain who turned the world into a black void, uh
Yes.
I was very much on the side of the good guys. And
Right.
so suddenly you start to realize that, yeah, a lot of the villains, they come from a belief, maybe they do go too far, but maybe it isn't so black and white, maybe they do have some valid points, maybe,
Mhm.
and you start thinking of these things, and a lot of these characters become much more interesting. And we do see that, especially in, like in fairy tales, and stories based on fairy tales, which often
Mhm.
are like Disney movies, or like, they aren't characters, they're tropes, right? And so the villain is more complicated and more complex
Mhm.
than the very polished one-dimensional hero character. So you are more
Exactly.
drawn to the more complex characters, and especially as
Exactly.
creators, because we also want to explore complicated characters.
Mhm. No, and I think you bring up a lot of good points with that, is that usually also it's the villains that have the most radical and interesting thoughts. It's the villains who are allowed to have these really interesting views on society. I'm also going to take a second to talk about something that we talked about in our first spooky episode, which is the racial and queer implications of that.
Mm,
A lot of people of color love villains because villains are usually othered in a
yeah.
way that very much analogizes with the experience of being a different non majority race.
Mm,
Queer people often feel that way. We talked about X-Men a lot. X-Men was hugely formative for a lot of queer people because it wasn't a very unsubtle narrative to think that
mhm,
having, a mutation that you could turn off or turn on and have to pass in society versus not being able to pass in society as being a queer and or trans
yeah.
metaphor. So there's this very very interesting thing that, and I'll say this, and I'm kind of guarded with it. I know my thoughts were darkest when I was in high school, when I didn't have words to express my displeasure with being American, with being black, with having privileges but not as many privileges. I didn't have words to express that. So I
Mm,
expressed it through fictional villains who I saw wanting to watch the world burn, and I was able to put myself into those shoes. Not necessarily that I physically wanted that because I'm a child, but it was easy to slot myself into these roles or greatly sympathize
mm,
with characters that did. One of the most interesting things about that period is when I look back at like the OCs that I made for those characters, was that almost all of them were incredibly sympathetic to the villain's cause. So they're all like cult wives essentially. Like all the OCs that I made during those
mm,
periods, which were on varying different scales of this is just me or this is a completely original character that I am using to get my jollies off. They're all essentially cult wives where they're either incredibly sympathetic to what the villain is doing or they're remarkably complicit in what the villain is doing. Almost like that was me working through some stuff because I didn't have a vocabulary or the emotional maturity to go through it myself.
mm.
And I think that's a very, very tantalizing aspect of that, and I think it's interesting when I still look at the villains that, do it for me, that either, much like Dobby, go back to a feeling that I've held for years, or somehow tap back into that very latent feeling of I still have displeasure with the world and how it's done, like Killmonger. So it all does come full circle, which
It does.
is, it really does. Um, let's take a moment to talk about why are these villains usually so gay for the main character? I think it's down to screen time and goals.
Mm,
So your villain is usually framed as like the carbon copy opposite of
hmm.
your hero, down to them usually having like inverted color schemes. Like their goals are the same, but in different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think you see where that fails in some series where the villain is either too existentially a threat or his motivations don't make sense, his or her. We're mostly talking about men. But or their motivations just don't make sense. Like I remember having that a lot with like Orochimaru towards like the middle of Naruto, right
Mhm.
before we get to Shippuden, where it's like, okay, why are you still mad? I got it the first time. Okay, cool. But why are you still mad? You killed Saratobi. All right, fine. You did that. What is still the problem?
I think it's because he has that whole, it has the whole Onryo, Yurei, cursed
Yeah.
ghost vibe
Yes.
going. So he's just holding grudges, and he has like
Yeah.
long black hair, and he's just there to curse everyone. That's my
Right.
theory.
But yeah, because after a certain point, like, okay, well, what are you still doing? And I think sometimes, depending on how strong the narrative is around the story, you don't need to fully understand what the villain's problem is.
Mm.
But I think sometimes you do. I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I hate Shigaraki so much. Is that looking as a villain, it's like, okay, you're supposed to be this like dark foil to Izuku, but one of you is just correct and the other of you is a child. So you're not doing the thing. Where narratively they're set up as this dark foil where like they're cut of
Mm.
the same cloth, they're in versions of the same thing, blah blah blah. They both have horrible, weird, sketchy, bad touch mentors. They do.
What? Okay.
They
All
do.
Might's not that bad.
Let me just say that again. One more time.
I think he's quite sweet. I mean, it could be worse. What?
In a series like that, you say he could be worse.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
he could be a literal child abuser.
there are, but I didn't mention Endeavor by name,
You
did
didn't
I?
have to. I didn't need you to, because you did. He could be worse. He could just be Endeavor. I'm just saying, Izuku would have gotten a lot done if he was Endeavor's kid.
If he had survived, I feel
Yeah,
like he's a little,
okay, yeah,
a
first of
little
all, that kid is
fragile.
getting drowned in the river. That's true.
Oh God.
That's true. That whole mountain peak thing is going a very different way if Izuku is one of Endeavor's kids. That boy's getting drowned in a river. But I'm just saying, trauma aside, Shoto is very, very, very capable. If Izuku was one of those kids, there would be no League of Villains.
I do feel though, however, that if Endeavor had a child without a quirk, he would have drowned that kid in the river
I
himself.
mean,
Like he's
not
like,
so still alive.
mm. Okay,
So
but two,
he
really?
has a daughter who doesn't have a quirk. They aren't drowned in rivers.
Probably not for lack of trying. No, I don't.
That's the only reason why Natsuo survived. That's why he's so muscular.
No.
Fighting off his dad in the
No.
river.
This is how you teach them survival. This is how you get strong, Amanda.
That's, that's, that's why Datsuo is so strong. Just punching his dad in the face, trying to
Oh
knock him
my
out the rim.
god, what have I done? No, I
Because it's
don't.
correct.
Uh,
Uh,
but
but
also,
like,
I mean, yeah,
yes.
like just a side note that Endeavor is a good example of how, villains and heroes are not always black and white. And like you can be a hero and still be an awful person.
Yeah, and like I remember like feeling Horikoshi being like very like, oh look at me, I'm unmasking that sometimes heroes aren't heroes, and it's like you haven't had an original thought in 15 years, you fuckwit.
Oh my god, you're so mean. Also, yeah, no.
You haven't had an original thought in 15 years, you fuckwit. Harry
You're
Potter
so
did this 30 years ago. It's just X-Men. But like
mean.
sometimes you don't need a villain to make sense. And I think some of the best villains are the ones that don't make sense.
Mm.
One thing I absolutely hate about modern fandom, and I'm going to try not to make this about knives again, is shut up.
I didn't say anything.
You didn't have to. Is needing to rationalize why villains are villains. It's, oh, well, he has a tragic backstory. Oh, he was abused. Oh, he was maligned by society. Fuck off. Sometimes people are evil.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are bad. Fucking deal with it. I didn't have one of my favorite parts about Naraku and Inuyasha is literally he didn't get his dick wet with one priestess and decided to become one of the strongest villains in the entire world because he sold his soul to demons because Kikyo wouldn't sleep with him.
That is very incel of him. I'm sorry.
It is. No, it is. You're like, you're not wrong. That wasn't out of anger. You're correct. That wasn't anger. That was, you are 100% right. Like, he's the bandit thief Onigumo. Onigumo gets set on fire because he's a thief and keeps fucking people over. And Kikyo finds his charred, like, corpse, semi-corpse, nurses him back for a little bit, and like he wants her and she won't take him, one because she's with Inuyasha, and two, he's a literal like flaming tumor.
I'm not
So
saying that you have a type.
no, I only like Naraku when he's hot, because then when he sells his soul to demons and becomes the demon Naraku. Oof, long flowing black hair and demon eyes and Stephen Bloom's voice. Yes, let's go. Let's go. But like that's his whole thing. Is like, oh, Kikyo won't sleep with me. I guess I'm gonna sell my soul to demons. I don't need him to have a grander backstory like, oh, and I was beaten as a child and my father didn't love me and society cast me out because they thought that I poisoned one of the wells. No, he was just a weird incel who became a hot bishonen and decided to fuck shit up. That's all we need. But I think there is nothing connecting all of these evil men. I will not
I
have.
said
I
nothing.
don't.
I
Shut
didn't.
up.
I didn't.
But sometimes you don't need that. Now, your villain usually wants to fuck your main character because that is their object of desire.
Mm.
Usually at that point, then the main character is some kind of stand in for society, a societal wrong, or just a personal vendetta. But as we've said in almost every episode, you have to love someone to hate them that much.
Yeah.
You have to love someone a whole lot to want to wipe them off the state, off of like the entire planet, to rid the world of their molecules. That is a lot of love that has to go into hate.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do what villains do to heroes without this being something that is deeply personal.
Yeah. And there goes without saying, like there is a lot of tension there, like there's
There
always
is.
like there's a connection there, like you said, it's incredibly personal most of the time, and then and the tension builds, and I don't like the word subtext because a lot of the time it's like a layer of oil just floating on the surface. Like it's very visible. Like
Yeah,
there's,
like
especially in
it's not
shonen.
subtext, it's just text.
Yeah, it's right there. It's highlighted. Like it's,
Right.
it's just. But I think, and you know, bringing up my favorite Batman movie again, Lego Batman, which is the best Batman movie, and I fight anyone. But I think that the way that they portray that relationship between Batman and Joker in the Lego Batman movie is, you know, they're literally putting their finger on this exact relationship, you know,
Hmm.
because it is a love, you know, it is a love relationship, it is a romantic
Hmm.
relationship, and Joker being all, you know, you haven't even said that you hate me. Like it's literally just an inverted relationship. This is
Right.
how so many villain hero relationships work.
Right. And what I love especially, I mean, I don't like Lego Batman that much, but I
But it's so
will,
funny.
it's fine. But like that's something that a lot of people, malign fangirls were thinking that like, oh, like the Joker and Batman like as a ship. You clearly haven't read the Killing Joke then, where the whole end of the Killing Joke is them saying they are part of each other, and if one
Mm,
dies, the other dies, and one created the other essentially. They are each other. They hold a
mm,
piece of each other's soul. They are foils. So when that's one of my favorite things sometimes when you get into like especially like Western comic book fandom and you'll see like Eastern comic book fangirl practices happen because for whatever reason, Western fangirls are convinced that they don't do shipping until you present them with like Supernatural or Doctor Who or Sherlock, and then they're like, "Oh fuck, we do shipping." Um,
mm-hmm.
because Western fangirls, especially the ones that are like just Westaboos, love to be like, "Oh, we don't do gross stuff like shipping," and then you just like throw super hulock at them and watch them rip each other's arms off because they do shipping.
Yeah.
But like that was something that was always considered to be like a taboo practice. Like, oh, don't bring your gross gay shipping into comics, and it's like I don't have to. It's already there.
Yeah, it's right
I
there.
don't have. What do you mean? Don't bring my gross gay shipping into comics? Look at them.
And also, like, again, I haven't seen an episode of Star Trek in my life, but Star Trek is the cradle for most modern fandom, including the
It
Japanese
is.
shipping practices. Like Star Trek, which I mean, it's always been there. It's
It
right
has.
there.
It has. I mean, there's a reason why Spurk is one of the oldest ships that has ever existed. Like it's always been there. And usually, again, like we'll talk about this more in the Fujin Brain Rot episode. That's one of the big reasons why, like, usually like, baby's first ship usually is going to be villain X
Mm,
main character. I remember like one of the really, and also like I'll go ahead and slide in a small place for like translation fuckery, where sometimes villains will get these like weird little lines or these weird little moments that like you're probably not supposed to think about too much, but then you start thinking about it and it's like, wait a minute. Like,
mm,
so Yu-Gi-Oh has this with Maximilian Pegasus, who is aggressively queer coded. And like the way he talks to Kaiba is like overtly very sexual. So when people started saying, I wonder if while Kaiba was in Pegasus's dungeon that they did anything, that wasn't a grand leap in logic to make.
mm.
That wasn't, Fujin brain math being like, oh, well, their fingers have touched the same surface, ergo they're married. This was Pegasus overtly making a reference to like Kaiba being attractive and being like, what? So villains will also usually get these like weird like throwaway lines
Mm,
that because the fan brain is not primed for throwaways, everything is considered to be of the same level of importance, that it becomes something that is deeply relevant. Also, just time. One of the biggest flaws of Naruto is that the female characters don't spend any time with usually the men that they're supposed to end up marrying.
Yeah.
So even so there was just the gross misogyny of people not liking Naruto ending up with Hinata because there was just the gross misogyny. But there was also like a not insignificant group of fangirls who, in this instance, I can't fault, who were like, just make him gay.
Yeah, but like even my straight male friends who ship Naruhina are unhappy
Right,
with it because it's so unnatural.
right,
Because he spends the entire freaking series chasing Sasuke, only cares about Sasuke. He
right,
projects his emotions about Sasuke to the entire fucking ninja world with his
right,
weird ninja telepathic powers, and then he marries some. It's like, what?
right. So you think about these characters who usually have a past history together, almost always. Like,
Mm.
there's very, very few times where a villain just rocks up, locks eyes on a hero, is like, you're my nemesis now. Like, there's almost always history there. It can be
Mm.
arbitrary. The villain might not know that they've done something to have wronged the villain, but there's history there, even if it's one sided. It makes perfect sense why we make these analogies and draw these conclusions.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of the wins and failings of that next month when we talk about Fujin brain rot. Now, why do we, particularly women, women and queer people, and I will include the theys, want to sleep with villains? You know, danger is sexy, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
I remember mentioning this a few episodes ago that I saw this and it said the hero saves you out of desire, the villain saves you because you're his. There
Mm.
is a lot of desire that creators and writers give to villains because villains not being held to a moral code or a moral standing means that what they're doing is what they want to do.
Yeah.
Batman is not saving you because he gives a fuck and a half about you. He's saving you because he has to, because that's how he's chosen to work through his trauma.
Yeah.
Now, if,
And
I mean,
because
I know, yes,
he'll receive very bad press if he doesn't
yes,
save the civilians.
right. Like he can't look at you and be like, not that one, and run away.
I would
Now,
be a terrible hero. I would
same.
be.
Same. Which is why we both be villains. Now, I know he's not a villain, but I'm going to use a vigilante stand-in. But Jason Todd, who's the Red Hood, he's pretty much a villain. If he is saving you, you either have something he wants, fill in whatever you want to with that one, or because he wants to.
Mm.
He has no obligation to save you. He probably has no desire to save you. If anything, he's going very far out of his way to do so and putting himself in danger to do so. He's saving you because he wants to. This is
Mm.
not an obligation. This is not a quota. This is not anything like that. Regardless of how transactional that relationship is, he is doing this of his own free will. And that's hot as fuck.
Yep.
It is alluring to think of yourself as someone's sole purpose of
Mm.
existing. And a lot of villains are very charismatic, they're very charming, they're very
Yep.
attractive. So, of course, and it's, you know, again, most of us became villain fuckers in our teens. How powerful that feeling is of being someone's sole expression of pleasure. That's powerful stuff. Girl, are you psychoanalyzing me?
Yeah. I'm trying. No, no. I mean, because obviously we do come from slightly different
We
places.
do.
Because I generally don't want to fuck any of these characters. I just want them screw each other. You're the one who you have a
Can
desire.
I help? Can I help you?
No, but like I don't have. I'm just listening because I don't really
No.
have as much to like from a personal perspective.
No,
But
I respect
obviously,
that.
But like everything that you just said, I can see how that is,
Yes.
attractive.
Yeah.
And then of course you have the age old, for some maybe the age old, oh, but I can fix him.
Hmm.
Especially if you have a villain who has a trauma at
Hmm.
the like at the ground level. Like I am very like on one hand, I think I am very, very superficial. Like if I fall in love with a villain, it might just be because I think he looks cool. Like
Hmm.
he looks cool, he looks attractive, that's all I need. But if you slap some trauma on, I'm like, yes. Like he has
Yeah,
a sad backstory. I love that. Like because that makes
absolutely.
him more, I don't know, more human.
No,
But
and there's a lot of power in that
yeah.
whole, I can fix him. That's
Mm,
another huge aspect to this, especially for those ascribed female as birth. Um, Women, especially in the West, are presented that relationships are an exercise in lowering your standards and being therapists to fundamentally broken men.
mm.
That's how love is sold
Yeah.
to most Western women
Yeah. And
is yes.
like even if you look at we've talked about this before, like if you look at what is conventionally considered romance,
Hmm.
be that in the West or in like in media such as shoujo, there are so many tropes that are basically just like stalking and harassing and
Hmm.
pushing until you get that yes. And when
Hmm.
all of those things with conventionally good guys, because they're played by, I don't know, Hugh Grant or whatever, you grow up watching all these romantic comedies from the 90s that are really just like, she said no, but I'm going to push her until she says yes. And then I'm going to stalk you and stand outside your door with these posters. I watched Love Actually for the first time a couple of years ago and I was horrified. But,
Right.
when you're
No.
presented with that as romance, there's not
Hmm.
really that much difference when you look at a villain because there are a lot of the same overlapping tropes, but the villain
Right.
is maybe they're dangerous, they're passionate, they are
Mhm.
different.
Right. And what I love is, and I see this a lot in fan works, is that while, of course, there is this desire to write dark characters and dark acts, so
Mm,
using villains through like rape role play and stuff like that, that is there. What is overwhelmingly there is this redemptive power of love,
yeah.
is I can fix him,
Mm.
or the hero's asshole can fix him.
Yeah.
um and I think that's so interesting is that, yeah, of course, there's always going to be stories where you have the villain as like a dark foil for dark desire. I
Mm.
definitely had that. There's a reason I wanted to fuck Shao Tucker in Full Metal Alchemist. That's a dark foil for dark desire.
Oh my god.
But when I look at other characters that I am similarly a villain fucker with, it's usually redemptive.
Mm.
It's, oh, I see something of myself in this
Yeah.
character. And not necessarily that I can fix it, but I can understand you in a way that
I
others
can
can't.
relate.
I can
Yeah.
relate.
And like
Or,
when
yeah.
we write,
Mhm.
for instance, the hero and the villain or
Mhm.
villains together, like the rivals. It's a lot of the time two profoundly broken people
It
who
is.
slot together
Mhm.
because, the dynamic is interesting, but also because they can understand each other on a
Mhm.
very deep and profound level that other
Right.
characters can't.
Absolutely. And I also don't want to ignore, at least like this is something that I noticed very, very strongly with my villain fucking, is power fantasy.
Mm.
And not just power as in like the ability to do violence and harm, but the power of resources. And this is something that I started thinking about socioeconomically, especially being of color,
Mm.
because while I can acknowledge that, of course, I am of privilege, I am definitely not of privilege in a lot of other things. So when I look at the characters that I have always wanted to be with, they're usually rich. They're mafia bosses. They're heads of the Yakuza. They're the heads of evil organizations. They are millionaires and billionaires. They are princes, kings. They have resources.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always wanted. Is resources, is unimaginable wealth, is being some Yakuza spoiled baby girl. Which is why I was a sugar baby when I was in college.
To a yakuza.
I wish.
Mm.
It was really just one nerd who I held his hand, and he was so clammy and sweaty that I said, I'm not going to sleep with you. But he kept buying me things. Like, he kept, like, for like an entire year of college, he paid for my groceries and, like, bought me, like, a bunch of manga. He got me my DS, and he bought me a Wii. He spent more money on me for Christmas than he did his mother.
Hmm. I mean,
And I never had to sleep with him. But, like, that's something that I can see in myself. It's amazing because, like, when I start thinking about, like, the characters that I have always loved that are rivals or that are antagonists, one of the big reasons why I'm usually not a huge fan of MCs is that they lack resources. But
mm,
who do I like? Yu-Gi-Oh is a great example. Who am I after? Maximilian Pegasus and Seto Kaiba. People that have resources. Who am I after when it comes to My Hero Academia? It's fucking Overhaul and Hawks who have or Endeavor who have resources.
hmm.
Like, that is not a subtle thing to consider, is how much of this is especially feminine power play, and it's perceived as negative because it's a power fantasy that allows women to feel empowered.
Yeah,
Because when men have their power fantasies, that's just called good writing.
of course.
But when women have their power fantasies, we're duplicitous monsters and we're terrible. Like, outwardly saying all this almost feels dirty. Like,
Mm.
admitting that, like, yeah, I would sleep with Overhaul for money. That almost feels dirty to say. But one, he's a fictional character. And two, I sold my shame when I was in high school to write better gay fanfic.
Yeah. And and again, stressing the point that we all know here, but we
Mhm.
are talking about fictional characters. We're talking
Yeah.
about fictional villains, fictional bad guys. But even if you look at truly evil people, like
Mhm.
dictators and oligarchs, and they have all of these things, and they have women throwing themselves at them, and
Right.
mistresses and lovers and men, and
Right.
it's like, because power attracts people, and it's like,
Right.
it is amazing how willing people, even in real life, are to look away from whatever horrible deed their man is
Absolutely.
doing out there, because you are living in a cushy palace, you have all the money, you have servants, you can.
Right, like, oh my god, it was the last king and queen of the Philippines before Duterte, who was a fascist and a horrible person, where they were tried for horrible crimes against the state for embezzlement and manipulation of resources, and everyone looked at the queen and was like, "Oh, she's terrible. Look at all the shoes she has. How could she do all this shopping and traveling while the country starves?" I'm sorry, I get it. I'm not saying it's right, but those shoes are really nice.
Yeah.
Those are some nice ass shoes. And what is she individually going to do? It's her husband who has all the power. Of course, she's going to relish in it. I'm not saying that's correct or good. I'm just saying I get where she's coming from. Them some nice shoes.
I mean, yeah, like, I get, not siding with
Yeah,
anyone
not
who, like,
siding with
your
anyone.
husband is a psychopathic,
Dictator.
dictator. Like, I'm not saying that that's a good,
No.
but you're already there. You might as well spend his money.
Right, you're already there. Just let it happen. So
Yeah.
this is where we're gonna do a two for
Jesus
one.
Christ.
So this is where we're going to do a 2-for-1 special and talk about fiction versus reality, and is being a villain fucker problematic. As we see the rise of puritanical culture in queer spaces and in fan spaces, what we see increasingly is people saying that wanting to be a villain fucker is problematic because it assumes that if you sympathize, relate to, or empathize with these villains, that you want to do the same thing that they're doing. To which I look at them and say, horse shit.
Well said.
Thank you. Of course, I look at a character like, oh my God, I don't, you know, Vicious from Cowboy Bebop, who I'm going to talk about too much. No, I don't want to be him, nor do I think that him doing a bunch of murders is good. Of course I don't. It's not real. And that's why having these fictional spaces to enact this kind of stuff is, this might be unpopular, almost societally necessary. So you don't do this shit in real life.
Yeah.
I understand that actual arson has consequences.
Really?
Even I know, right? Even though I am high key a pyromaniac. I like
You
fire.
are. You are.
I
Uh
love fire.
I was looking through, I just wanted to find the quote that I sent you yesterday because I was so fucking, it was so depressing. I was reading this academic paper.
Cole was
Let's
so
see.
mad.
I didn't finish reading it because it was 70 pages. Uh but yeah, it's a paper on cultural perspective on the sexualization of male villains and anti-heroes by Amanda Jobs.
I did not write this.
No, it was not you. It was a different Amanda. But in the introduction, this paper was written in 2019,
Ew.
and there is this sentence in the introduction that just made me want to throw something because it says our society's fascination with anti-heroes and attractive villains has become more and more pronounced in the 21st century as Western society has moved away from Puritan ideals. And I'm sitting here in this horrible purity culture going, oh, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to rewrite the paper. But
Yeah.
it's, yeah, that it's just depressing. um
But like, there's a part of me again that like probably gives aunties more credit than they deserve. I can understand that if you lack imagination and creativity, that I would also be concerned about why villains are so widely beloved. I can understand from my mother's perspective, looking at me, looking at Satan, being like, yeah, this guy has some good points. I can understand now why my mother was horrified at that. To me, if that is an issue, it's not. But if it is, that's a failing on the writer,
mm,
not on the reader. So, like we mentioned Killmonger a bunch of times, I actually did end up having a huge problem with that in his character. And I actually considered him to be a very dangerous character to create, especially
mm,
at the time that he was released, because there was increased civil unrest with being African
yeah,
American. And his call to arms is very tantalizing for a lot of black people.
yeah,
And that call to arms went well approximately 0% of the time because the FBI will just assassinate people.
yeah. I remember watching that and being like, I mean, again, I love him. Maybe because
Yeah,
I mean, he's hot, first of
he
all.
is. He is.
I'm I'm a weak person,
That's
okay?
fair.
But but it's one of those things where again, if a minority
Mhm.
does anything at all, it will reflect poorly on literally
Right.
everyone. And even
Absolutely.
though Eric Killmonger is a fictional character, at the time, I remember watching the movie and thinking, "Oh, baby, no," because
Yeah,
now you're giving them
exactly.
ammo.
Exactly. No, that was me. And
Yeah.
you get to the end where he's like, "This is for my ancestors that chose death over subjugation." It's like, no, baby, no. Like, because there's black people that feel that way, and that's not good. So, like, to me, that onus isn't on the people that saw that and felt something. That's on the writers.
Hmm.
That's on Ryan Coogler. That's on producers and directors and series heads. That isn't on the individual. And then, there is also, adaptational attractiveness, where oftentimes, because villains are so attractive, that of course by proxy, they sound correct. Now, am
Mm.
I saying that all villains need to look monstrous? Of course not. I would
No.
still fuck Dobby, even though his skin is stapled onto him. But
And again, Shigaraki, my love.
he needs
Uh,
lotion. Um,
he does need lotion,
he
but
needs
I'll
lotion.
I'll rub it on him. It's fine.
I love that this is like the hill that I'm going to die on.
All things.
I will literally fuck Dobby's stapled on dick, but I'm so grossed out by you wanting to lay with Shigaraki. I love that about that's the funniest thing about being a
I
villain
think
fucker.
it's so funny.
That is the funniest thing is that like your standards are your standards and anyone else's is deviant and abhorrent.
I know, right?
I am willing to ride Dobby's stapled on dick until the heat death of the universe. But the idea of you being in the same room as Shigaraki is physically nauseating.
Do you think that maybe being, at least this particular breed of villain fucker makes us more accepting of
No.
each other's differences? No, because
No.
clearly
It makes
not.
it worse. Exactly. You would think, oh, we have so much in common. No, you're wrong. And I hate you.
I am boarding the SS Gaslight right now and coming
Yeah.
over there.
We are both on our respective sides of the SS Gaslight. Fuck you.
Oh god.
But
No, yeah.
So is there a problematic element to wanting to fuck villains? Sure. There are absolutely people that look at that and look at that power fantasy and say, I want to do that. It's one of the reasons why, fun fact about me, if I see too many Joker cosplayers in one room, I get anxious.
Yeah.
Because we had a whole Aurora, Colorado shooting. So like if I'm at a con and there's too many Joker cosplayers in one place, I my heart starts to race and I get anxious. Like, yes, there are absolutely people who have and continue to take that too far. But that's not the fault. Now, in that instance, that is not the fault of the series. That is not the Joker's fault. That's that person's fault. Except for when media. This is going to be a very unpopular opinion. I was one of those people that like boycotted Todd Phillips's Joker movie because at the time I thought that it was socially irresponsible to produce yet another movie about disenfranchised, mentally ill incel white men that lead a revolution, especially in the wake of all the incel white men who kept killing people.
Yeah. I think I think that's a fair.
So I was one of those people, and
I
yes,
still haven't seen it.
I won't. In hindsight, was that movie this revolutionary call to arms? No, thank God, because it isn't a massive leap in logic to see how it could have. It's one of the reasons I, to this day, do not like The Dark Knight. Because there is, at a certain point, some responsibility that creators have to take. So to me, that is a great example to reevaluate how we do a character like the Joker. And that is not on any one individual. I think that is an audit that needs to be done by everyone. We all need to look at this and figure out, why do people who keep doing murders keep liking this one guy? And a lot of it is a lack of actual understanding. A lot of it is edgelord comic book writers that thrived between the 80s and the 90s. It's a lot of different things. It's socioeconomic, it's social, it's radicalization, it is alt-right ideation. There's a lot of individual factors. So do I blame the Joker as a concept? Of course not. Do I have a lot of questions about the choices directors and actors make in relating to this character? Yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about Todd Phillips making him yet another mentally ill, disenfranchised white man, played by an incredibly charismatic actor.
Yeah.
I have some questions about that.
Which is valid. And I think, not that I think that our listeners, I think that our listeners are, intelligent enough to understand where you're coming from.
Listeners.
No, because I'm just saying, because coming from, from us and from our podcast, where we spend so much time talking about how fiction is not reality, and
Mhm.
like, but sometimes there is correlation, and
Mhm.
sometimes fiction can affect reality. It's kind of like when we talk about, because we talk so much about, problematic ships or problematic relationships, and then, we compare it to something like, you know for the straights, like Twilight and 50 Shades, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, you can appreciate those tropes, and it's fiction, but the problem with those franchises was how it was, in particular, romanticizing that kind
Mhm.
of unhealthy relationship, and
Mhm.
then selling it to impressionable young girls who
Mhm.
are already being drowned in, the idea of what romance is supposed to look like, and, how you're just passively accepting it instead of
Mhm.
being critical. And it's kind of like the same thing. It's not necessarily that the trope in itself is bad and will cause, everyone to go out and make these choices, be
Mhm.
that getting involved with someone who is abusive, or, thinking that it is okay to blame mental illness and go out on, like a shooting spree. Like that,
Right.
of course, that doesn't happen to everyone, and that won't necessarily be an issue, but sometimes it is. And like, we are capable of seeing both sides and having
Right.
concerns,
Mhm.
even though, yes, it is fiction.
Of course. And I think that's the thing, is just it's acknowledging that this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So I think my biggest issue where a lot of the anti-argument comes, it's usually placing that beam under things that I'm not concerned about. And by
Mm.
I mean like greater I, not just me individually. So like for me, again, like there are villain archetype characters that I have very similar concerns about, i.e., the Joker. Like, I have concerns about how society continues to portray him, and why there is a very certain type of guy on the internet who likes him a little bit too much, and how those guys keep doing violence against women. I have a massive problem with the romanticization of Joker Harley Quinn relationships. I think that is actively damaging to women.
Mm.
I am not concerned about whatever the villain in fucking Jujutsu Kaisen is.
Oh my god.
I'm not fucking worried about Shigaraki. That's not the villain I'm worried about. I think like that's the issue that I have with it when it comes to antis, is that they seem to be so focused on Eastern media, because it
Mm.
goes back to that conversation we had with Dr. Thomas, where there is still a lot of this concern about Eastern media being abhorrent and deviant, and it's
Mhm.
different. You need to look in your fucking backyard
The call is coming from
from
inside the
inside the
house.
house. Like, yeah, I absolutely have characters that I am concerned about, that people consistently don't seem to understand and consistently misrepresent.
Mm.
Absolutely. And I think that it is our time as consumers, as writers, as readers, to start voting with our dollar in that regard. It's not an anime, though. That's not where I'm worried. Most anime villains are so, pardon the figure of speech, cartoonish, that anyone who does say, oh, yes, I am enacting the plan of Lelouch Lamperouge, fuck you, nerd.
First of all, how?
Yeah, first of all, yeah, how? Like, that's not a threat to me. The worst we had was the Belgian Kira murder case. And even then, everyone could look at that guy and be like, you're fucking wrong. And nothing in Death Note frames Light as anything but a murderer.
Mhm.
So, of course, when like the Belgian Kira murder case happened, it's like, oh shit, this guy killed a bunch of guys. Yeah, because the fictional character killed a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't happen again. Shocker. You know, X Day came out. There weren't a whole series of school attacks because of X Day. There are a lot of school violence that is rooted because of shit like the Dark Knight.
Yeah. And it's like, it's one of those things when something or someone or a character becomes like a figurehead or like almost like an idol for a certain group of people, you
Yes.
know. And it's not only the Joker, there are multiple examples of, you know, people taking things and even taking them out of context and
Mhm.
then making them like a symbol for
Mhm.
this usually completely off the rockers movement that, you know,
Right.
is taking everything completely out of context, but it becomes a thing. It's like I don't know, this is such a dumb comparison, because remember how Marilyn Manson became the face of, you know, all of the horrible things that happened in 1999, and then it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but the Columbine shooters didn't even listen to his music. Then of
Right.
course it hurts everyone when you find out that he actually
Sex
is
predator. Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for that. But you know,
Well,
it's
and
kind of the same thing.
you know what actually came to mind to that was, and this is probably like a very, very deep kind of American reference, was Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Mm.
That people were so worried about a comic character called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac when the creator, who was also the creator of Invader Zim, goes out of his way to not endorse what Johnny's doing, that he is crazy, that he is in his own little world, that his actions are still terrible. Everyone is constantly negging him, including himself. You are always saliently aware that what Johnny is doing isn't okay. So yeah, there wasn't some weird death cult around Johnny the Homicidal Maniac because all the framing of the work said that what he was doing wasn't okay.
Mm.
There's not enough done in some of these Western properties to do that. And oftentimes, what I find is that a lot of these characters that do villainous things are not necessarily considered villains. You talked about stalking for romance. There's a great video essay by Pop Culture Detective where he talks about it specifically in Harrison Ford movies. And
Mm.
Harrison Ford, leading man, attractive man, who, in for whatever reason, all of the romances he's on screen just berates, belittles, and stalks the women that he's trying to date.
Yeah, I think I've seen this essay.
It's a great essay. That's harmful. Oh my god, what was the movie with Chris Pratt? Passengers,
I
where
have not seen that one.
okay, spoiler for the movie Passengers. So Passengers is about like this space voyage that leaves Earth to go to an Earth-like planet, and everyone's in cryo sleep, and they're supposed to wake up, you know, in X decades, whatever, until you reach the next star. There is a
Oh
malfunction.
yeah, right. That.
Yeah, there's a malfunction. Chris Pratt's character gets left out. He's like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die alone here because I'm supposed to still be in cryo sleep. So he wakes up Jennifer Lawrence's character and he lies to her. He says, oh, it must have been the same malfunction. No, he stalks her,
Mm.
looks at her, and is like, I want to fuck you. Breaks her pod, condemns her to death with him, and then she finds out, and like they have to like go save the ship together or whatever, and like eventually through just attrition falls in love with him and accepts that he has condemned her to death on this flying spaceship. And I remember again another Pop Culture Detective video essay where if you watch that in reverse, that's a horror movie.
Yeah.
That's a horror where a man who does not know a woman violates her agency and condemns her to death. That is a horror movie. But we're not supposed to examine it that way
No.
because look at Chris Pratt, very attractive, handsome man, and clearly he was just lonely. So yeah, that's my issue with it when it comes from Puritans, is that they're often, to me, their lens is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Not that their point is necessarily wrong. It's they're aiming it, you know, it's like the magnifying glass where like you're burning ants, which is something that only sociopaths do. It is. I don't understand when people are like, oh, kids will be kids. Yeah, that's death.
Yeah. I never did that.
I never did that. Like it's your magnifying glass is on the wrong thing. It's there and it should be there. We should examine these
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
but you're pointing it in the wrong direction. All right. It has been nearly 2
Oh
hours.
my god.
We're going to wrap this up by talking about some of our top 5 fuckable villains,
Oh my god.
which means we're
You
going to
know
be
how,
here.
you know how hard this was?
This was really hard.
Because no, but because I swear that a lot of my villains, I'm using air quotes, are
Mm.
not actually villains.
Yeah, they're just sweet meow meows.
They're just misunderstood. They all
Yeah,
have their reasons.
they're just sweet precious meow meows. They all have very
Yeah,
good points.
they do. Or they're just hot and have sad backstories. But like there were a lot of characters. Like I really had to Google. Like I had to go in and like Google to
Yes.
kind of like get an idea of characters that I liked and whether or not they were villains. Because like
Yeah.
if you look at for instance like Isaya from Durarara, right? Like he's
Mhm.
not a villain. He's not a good person, but he's not a villain.
Right. Like, and I admit I had that a little bit too, where like even some of mine, I have a hard time really like I was able to like find villains, but like the ones that came to mind at first were usually like antagonists or rivals.
Yeah, same.
So this list was harder than expected,
Yeah.
which of course leads with me having to talk about Knives, who from the 98 Trigun, I looked at him and was like, I would like to climb this weird nerd like a tree. Knives is fascinating because, especially in the 98 version and in the manga, he had no real rationale behind why he hated humans so much outside of his race, him and Vash being plants, being superior to humans. He's very like Magneto coded, which, shocker, I like Magneto a lot too. But like he's essentially Magneto. He's like, we
Mhm.
are superior to humans. We should subjugate them. And I don't know why you, Vash, keep wasting your time with them. They're essentially pets to him, which is why he's able to become on Earth essentially a cult leader. One of the biggest failings I have with Stampede is trying to take a character who never needed to be sympathetic and trying to make him sympathetic. Knives does not need a sympathetic backstory to make him make sense. I think, if anything, it's insulting to the character. I had no questions about why Knives shot Rim and destroyed the Seeds project in the 1998 version.
You know, listening to you talk about this while I still am trying to,
Oh,
watch
it's
the
gonna.
show. I'm just confused. I don't know what you're talking
You know
about. So I'm
what?
just
And I
like,
promise you, you're gonna meet Knives, and every weird quirk of my personality is going to make sense to you. You're going to meet him, and you're gonna be like, "That fucking bitch." You're gonna,
you're like a puzzle. And like the more things that I watch, it's like, oh,
yeah, literally, I'm like the movie Memento, where you're just working backwards, and then the
yeah.
more you know, the more it's like, God damn it. Like that's literally me. You can learn so much about me from the characters that I like a lot, and especially the ones that I've liked for a long time. I have liked Knives since the 98 version,
Hmm.
which should tell you everything you need to know about me because he had no plan, no plot, no point back in the day. He literally treats humans like trash, which is why Legato being a simp for him is so funny because Legato is convinced that, like, oh, when Knives kills all the humans, I guess that means I'm safe. You will not be spared, Legato. When he says I'm going to kill all humans, he means you too. Um, but I've always loved him in the way that, like, I think if you frame him as a cult leader, that's why he makes so much sense as far as like why people like him. Um, I I quote unquote respect what Stampede is trying to do by trying to give him a little bit more active agency. I didn't need that. I didn't need him to make sense. He's a villain from the 90s. He didn't need to make sense.
Yeah, that is actually very true.
There's nothing about Trigun that makes sense,
No.
especially the manga. Like, there's nothing about Trigun that makes any sense. Trigun is 13 different series condensed into one series. So, no, I didn't need him to have higher reasoning or higher logic outside of he's a literal immortal plant deity. Of course, he doesn't like humans, and he's perfectly fine subjugating, abusing, and killing them. And I've wanted to fuck him since I was a teenager.
Fair. You're loud.
Thank you. Carola, you and your questionable taste in men.
What is what is wrong with the first point on my list? I was like, this is an undisputed villain, and then I looked him up just now because you're doing this whole, you're doing this nice introduction into knives, and I'm like, I literally just have Sukuna written up as a, like I just have Sukuna's name. No, and I just wanted like to see if I could introduce, and then it friggin' says on the Jujutsu Kaisen wiki that he is the primary antagonist. So I guess he's not a
He's
villain. But
not.
but I put Sukuna because I'm not reading the manga. I have been horrifically spoiled for Jujutsu Kaisen, and I am in despair. But I am only watching the anime, and I am way behind on season 2 for reasons. But Sukuna for me, it was like the moment he was reincarnated or whatever you want to say, that because you're like Itadori eats one of his crusty old fingers. Do you sense a pattern here? Because like Shigaraki with all of his fucking hats, and then there's Sukuna with his 20 fingers.
There was a reason why in our outline when you wrote that I just wrote "whore" in all caps.
But it's like, so Itadori eats one of his crusty old fingers because that was I don't know why anyone would do that. And then Sukuna is essentially brought back and he lives inside of Itadori's body. And anyone who knows me will understand that when you have a fucking demon who is hot living inside of the body of the protagonist and then manifesting as essentially like an evil looking twin of his, that it spells it out perfectly.
He's just Shigaraki.
Like, why would I? Like, he's so hot.
He's just Shigaraki in AFO.
But he's sexier though. I will say that. Like,
wow, controversial statement over here on the Yaoi Shelf.
I don't even have
a literal baked potato without eyes and a guy with severe eczema is less attractive.
Listen,
wow.
Sukuna has a lot of eyes, okay? He has like 4.
Is that to make up for AFO's lack of eyes?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know, but it's just something about him that speaks to me. But I think it is especially when I realized yeah, which part? The 20 fingers. No. But the fact that he, it's just, I think that a lot of it was what I discovered, because the first thing I did, I went on Twitter, on Japanese Twitter, and I Googled, like I Twitter searched Itadori and Sukuna, because I was like, this has to be a pairing, right? And then I unlocked the unholy Japanese fan art, and I was like, yes.
Because it's just bleach self-cessed, right?
Yeah, I think that absolutely is. It's like bleach self-cessed. It's like Hollow Ichigo and Ichigo. It is. It appeals to that same part of me.
This is why in our outline I literally just wrote "whore" in all caps, because it's just Hollow Ichigo and Ichigo.
It was so typical because like I finally opened the outline and decided to start typing in it, and you're there, and then I just see you.
Or
the moment I wrote it in, I see Amanda just highlighting the text and starting to write a comment, and it just says "whore." I'm like, wait, what did I reply? And then I was like,
yes, and oh my god, yeah, like I literally. Usually the outline isn't like one of my tabs because like I'll be working on something and then ADHD will kick in. It's like, oh, this gotta go, because otherwise it'll be gone forever. Yeah. So I saw Carola in there. I was like, yes, now's my time. Yeah, like it's Hollow Ichigo and Ichigo. Which means I'm not here to judge. Like that's not the thing I'm gonna judge you on, because that's not it.
Notice how I didn't put Shigaraki on the list though.
I don't think you have to.
No, I think I've talked so much about him like in the past like half year or so.
Yeah, I don't think you have to.
So he's not on the list.
All right. The next two are going to be very, very obvious if you listen to me at all, which is Shishomaru and Naraku from Inuyasha. Again, these are guys that like they have motivations, but they're stupid. Like Shishomaru's whole thing is that like his dad fucked a human, and that's how Inuyasha exists, and he's bitter about it because Inuyasha becomes his dad's favorite. Like Inuyasha's mom is a home wrecker. I mean, it's not like her fault, but like she is a home wrecker. Like the dog general was supposed to just be with Shishomaru's mom, and like they were supposed to be a family, and like that's the heir to the dynasty. But then he like is enraptured by this human, and Inuyasha is born, and Inuyasha receives all of the inheritance of the dog general, mostly being in the form of swords. So Shishomaru, who literally is like the prince of this like demon society, gets shafted for a half demon, half brother.
Mm.
And he's deeply angered by it. Like, upset isn't the right word. He is angered by it. He hates everything relating to Inuyasha because of what he symbolizes. And in hindsight, it's super fucking petty and stupid. But it's powerful enough that makes sense. I'm an only child, but I can rationalize and understand jealousy. I can understand looking at someone who you perceive to be lower brow than you getting everything you like. That is something that you will notice when it comes to characters, and especially MCs, that I have a huge chip on my shoulder about. Is when MCs get the prize object through, to me, perceived lack of work.
Mm.
That ties into some trauma that I have. I'm working on it in therapy. But like, I didn't need Shishomaru to have bigger motivations. Being a jealous asshole is motivation enough. The same thing with Naraku. I explained his origin. I didn't need him to have grander ambitions. He wants to hurt and kill and subjugate because he's an evil person. He curses Moroku's family because he can. He does horrible things because he wants to. He doesn't need to have this tragic backstory. There is nothing for you to sympathize with. He's a bad guy.
Mic drop.
But like that's something that I think blows my mind with like so many like modern villains, is that it's like, oh, well, of course, this villain makes sense because really he's just like subjugated by society. And like, yeah, I like that occasionally, but I think that there's so much power in a villain who's just evil because he's evil.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I love a tragic backstory and, a
Absolutely.
reasoning and subjugation. But sometimes, villains are just evil for no fucking reason, or they have a reason that makes sense to them, which is just okay. But I like that too.
Exactly. So, yeah, and again, characters that I've loved since I was a child.
Mm.
So, yeah, there's definitely not a pattern here at all. Don't ask questions.
You want? Are you done?
Oh yeah, you
Okay.
you next.
So my next one. Listen, I don't know if he is a villain, but I put my beloved, my ultimate psychopath, my beautiful Kiriyama Kazuo from Battle Royale, specifically the movie version,
Okay.
because I fell in love with him when I was like 14 years old and I first saw the movie. And I was obsessed. I didn't know the name of the actor. I didn't know anything. We just used to call him like the hottest psychopath because he's so friggin' sexy. Like, he doesn't have a line in the entire film. He's brilliant and I love him. But the thing about Kiriyama is that the way that he exists in my head, because I am so good at like, I like making excuses for my poor little meow
I
meow.
do.
And he is incredibly misunderstood because the thing that I have done is that I had watched the movie at least 20 times by the time I read the novel. So I read the novel and find out that, in the movie, in Battle Royale, Kazuo is one of the two transfer students who are put on the island to help with the process of the students killing each other. If anyone hasn't seen Battle Royale, what the hell are you doing? This is my life. This is my religion. I love this film. You don't understand. Anyway, so he But if you look at the behind the scenes documentary, there's a scene where the um not the director, but the assistant director, who's the director's son,
Mm-hmm.
says that right before they started filming, his father, Fukasaku Kinji, who's the director,
Mm-hmm.
has like made up, changed his mind, and he's like, no, I want to make Kiriyama a villain after all. So it's literally just because of that that I decided to actually accept him as a villain, because in the movie they make his role bigger than they had intended, because they'd actually shrunk his role, because in the novel
Mm-hmm.
Kazuo is one of the original classmates, and it is explained that he is a complete sociopath because of some freak car accident that happened while he was still in his mother's womb that carved out some nerves of his head, so he doesn't know the difference between right or wrong. So
Mm-hmm.
in my head, movie Kazuo has book Kazuo's backstory, and therefore he cannot be blamed for his actions. And he is perfect, and I will defend him until the day I die. And I ship him like crazy with the other transfer student, Kawada, because they're hot together and I love them and they're one of my ultimate OTPs. But I also think that he is the only one that I have genuinely wanted for myself at some point in my life, because he's so beautiful.
I would like the record to state that I will ask Carola like genuine questions about how she's feeling, and she can't give me an answer, but she can rationalize this fictional character for several minutes.
You know, when I tell people, just to underline how I'm feeling about things these days, and they will, and I will be like, no, you don't understand. I haven't been this obsessed about a live action thing as I am about Kin Porsche since Battle Royale. And everyone just goes, oh,
I
oh
can
my
confirm
God.
that. I can confirm
And
that.
no, and Battle Royale is one of those things. I love it. You've seen it, right?
Yes, it's been a
Yeah.
long time that I've seen it.
I love it so much. And the thing is, like, I collect it. Like, I have so many editions of the DVDs and the manga and the books and everything. But I am so obsessed. Like, there was this one time we were hanging out at the comic book store for some cosplay event, and we're like hanging out, and there's like a new dude who we don't really know, and he's like hanging with us, and they have a new edition. And when I say new edition, it's literally just the cover art is different, but they have a new edition of Battle Royale that I don't own. And I'm like, how could you not tell me that you had this stocked? Like, obviously I'm buying it. And then our new friend looks at me and he goes, you haven't seen it before? And I kid you not, everyone who was with us just cleared the room. They were like, fuck, no, we're not.
I would do the absolute same thing. Like if I was anywhere near there, I'd just be like, I'm gone.
Oh, but he's perfect. I love him. He's very misunderstood, but he is my
He is.
favorite. Oh, he's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. Characters that I've talked about a lot, which is Dobby and Overhaul. Go
Woo!
figure. The two villains from My Hero Academia that I like the most are literal Yakuza boss and daddy issues personified.
I don't understand I don't get where this came from.
It's really,
Wow.
blinking you'll miss it. Real subtle.
Especially the Yakuza part. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, that doesn't relate to anything at all. Don't investigate that further. And don't ask my therapist about it either. Oh, but yeah, like it's amazing because I look at like I think when it clicked for Dobby, when I started realizing like, oh, it's more than I just want to fuck him. It was when I realized that he's just Eric from Phantom of the Opera. Like it's the exact same narrative. And I never really wanted to fuck Eric, but I related to him on a molecular level when I was in high school because I also was gay and different. And it felt like, while I wasn't physically scarred, I was emotionally scarred and the world doesn't understand me. But I have all this talent and only if they only saw. And it's like, shut the fuck up.
Oh my God, you were so edgy.
That was the fucking worst. The fucking worst.
Would you like your teenage self if you met your teenage self?
I would drown my teenage self in a river. Absolutely. People are like, I saw this thing where, especially like if you're like healing childhood trauma, it's like you are now the person that your teenage self would feel comfortable with. No, I would drown my teenage self in a mall fountain. Absolutely not. My teenage self is not safe around me. I would push them into a river. No. I was an insufferable little edgelord back in those days who often just wanted to be different. Think of like Tim Burton, who loves to pretend like he's anti establishment while being an establishment fucking bootlicker. That was me. Like I loved like making a show out of like, oh, I'm so edgy and like people don't understand me. It's like people understand you. You were popular and had friends. You were president of the anime club and the Latin club. Like you were a nerd, but like you had friends. You were fine. So like yeah, Dobby really like tapped into like this very like high school feeling that I think that's what makes him so like viscerally attractive to me. Um, I maintain that I think if My Hero Academia came out, like it swapped places with Naruto, MHA would be my religion.
Mm.
The only thing keeping it from it being something that I am willing to openly say that I like on a whole is one, I still hate the main cast. If they literally just got rid of all the children, I'd be much happier.
Sounds like something a true villain would say.
I mean, I don't want something bad to happen to them. I just don't want them around. like there, I don't know. Like there's a bus accident. Like
Bus accident.
I don't
Where
know.
where were the heroes, Amanda?
I mean, I don't know.
Someone's getting fired.
I'm just saying, I don't know if you've been keeping up, but the heroes usually ain't doing shit. But like, there's so much about MHA that I feel like is designed for me
Mm.
until they have to be a shitty shonen. And then I hate it. Because there's so much of it that draws from like Western comics. Again, it's X-Men. And even down to like the bureaucracy of the hero society, along with the hypocrisy of the hero society, the villains essentially just being vaguely quoted vagrants, except for Overhaul, who was just correct. I love that weird neurotic man. But like, and then they have to do dumb teenage shit, and I lose interest in a way that I think I only lost interest with my early boyfriends. Just like I yeet gone. The minute they have to focus on any of the children again, I'm like, I just want Cheers with the League of Villains. If you can give me that, this is the best show I've ever seen in my entire life. If you can give me Scandal with the Hero and Public Safety Commission, or you can give me Cheers with the League of Villains, this is the greatest anime that has ever existed. The minute you have to focus on children again, I hate all of you.
Mm.
But Dobby really tied into this like very like this is a character that I would have loved when I was 15 and I love still that I'm in my 30s. He is every edgelord amalgamation that my dumb horny brain has found attractive for 20 years. He is Sasuke, Naruto, vicious. He is every shitty character that I've ever loved, literally stapled together with a hot, raspy voice and fire. This is a genetically modified experiment in Amanda desire. And it's successful. But I also think, to the point that we made earlier, one of the reasons I like him so much is pairing him because he ends up being a bit of a litmus test of writer wishes.
Hmm.
So pairing him with Hawks, you get a lot of, oh, well, they're representations of two halves of the same whole. Both of them want the exact same thing, which is Endeavor's appreciation and acknowledgement, where Hawks does end up becoming the son that Endeavor always wanted in a lot of ways, which is one of the other reasons I don't ship End Hawks. Is because in a weird way that feels gross to me in a way that I don't like.
That is interesting, considering.
Honestly, there was one Endhawk story that I ended up reading, and the writer made the choice to just like have Inji just like divorce Ray and then like promptly marry Keigo, and like Ray's fine with it. And that was the most insulting thing I've ever read. That like you're going to have this giant man just like legally divorce his wife and then have his ex-wife at his wedding with his like 20 years younger twink new boyfriend. That was the most insulting thing I'd ever read. And like I have read actual gunplay and I was more upset by Inji leaving his wife for Keigo. I have weird standards.
You do.
But that was upsetting to me. But or you can put Dobby with other like more villainous characters. Like I really like Dobby Hall because then you have the juxtaposition of neat freak Overhaul and literal trash possum Dobby. You have germaphobe Overhaul and literal trash monster, or Dobby and Skeptic, where you have someone who is very corporatized and very establishment to someone who is literally the physical embodiment of a hot topic anarchy symbol. So I love him almost like a pH indicator in different roles.
Yeah, I can see that though.
Overhaul, I just like him because he's Yakuza and he's hot and I want him to say mean things about me.
Which is very valid.
Yep.
That is incredibly valid.
Thank you. Next for you. Not the Akatsuki.
Yes, I have listed, not literally, but it literally says about 90% of the Akatsuki.
Okay, who's the one that you wouldn't?
Setsu, I think. Maybe I don't have very strong feelings for Hidan and Kakuzu. Okay. Like I think they're married. I just don't really care.
Yeah, they're married. They are married.
But I don't really care about them. But it's like, but everyone else, and I think a lot of it is the same, like, you know, how you just described the Dobby litmus test, because, you know, the constellations. Because there was a period, and I've talked about this before, where I thought like pairing up different parts of the Akatsuki is super fun. Like obviously I have my preferences, like, you know, Kisaita and Sasode and sometimes
Sasode is just canon.
Yeah, Sasode is canon.
It's also just Matt and Mello.
Kisaita is also canon, and I will fucking die on this hill.
We disagree on that.
But then there's also, I mean, and when I say, like, when I talk about pain, I also mean all of the other pains, you know, like the pain clones, like Pain Apples, you know, the tiny one with the pineapple hair, the cute one. We used to call it Pain Apples.
What are fangirls doing?
I don't know, but I was having a great time. But I love the Akatsuki because they, you know, there are so many dynamics, and you can, like, they can have an orgy, or you can split them up into little pairs. And I love Konan. Like, she's a girl, so she doesn't have any place on the Yaoi Shelf, but I love her.
I love her as like the ultimate Fujo.
Yeah,
but which is how I've always seen her.
But I can also see her with, you know, Yahiko and Nagato. Like I can see her with either of them or both of them at the same time, but also Yahiko and Nagato together, and then you know, Konan just enjoying the view. I think the Akatsuki are super fun, and again, there's a lot of trauma, and they're all hot, and Deidara with his fucking hands, and I just, what is it with these hands, Amanda? Like I am discovering.
Well, also that, like, Sasori and Deidara is just Matt and Mello.
Yeah.
Like, which, I mean, I love them too. So, but yeah, the Akatsuki is interesting because I think out of all of the Akatsuki, the only one that I really wanted to sleep with was Itachi.
But I mean, he's so pretty.
Yeah, I mean, brooding, overly powered bad boy. And I think, I mean, Kisame doesn't do it for me. I'm not in a place where I'm here to judge anymore. But if this was like 15 years ago, I would have judged the fuck out of you for that. Even though the character I will go to town on is Zabuza, who is just a non-scaly version of Kisame.
I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Zabuza and Kisame get it on because they have, again, it's the
that
twin
would be
fact.
The most violent, hateful fucking. And
I am here.
Yeah, I would at least like to see it once.
Yeah,
I can't say that I'd enjoy it, but I would love to see it once.
But Kisaida took a little while, and I think I talked about this before. There was this one particular dojin by Raureif, where and it's so pretty. I own it now. Like it took me ages. I tracked it down. I own it. It's so
Mhm.
beautiful. And it has like the most it is actually now that I can read it a little bit, it is actually quite heartbreaking, but it's very pretty. And like there's this incredibly debauched sex scene. But my favorite bit of it is when Kisame is painting Itachi's nails because Itachi's vision is starting to go. And I was just, I can't, like, they're so soft. And then you have the whole scene when he's like, Itachi, are you crying? And Itachi's like, no. And I'm like, but he knows. Yeah, I'm fine. But I love them. But it was like baby's first monster, because he's a shark man
I
and he
don't
was my
like him.
first.
I don't like him. And
Oh.
I think for me, I was also like so high on like Uchiha Cest because like that's also
Mm.
just canon because it
Yeah,
is. So
it is.
like I think I was just like so captured by Uchiha Cest at that time or Self Enter because I loved Itachi when I was
Mm.
younger. I think the only reason why I don't really have like a lot of Naruto villains on here is because Naruto did the thing where like right towards the end of the main series and getting into Shippuden that they decided to be spineless and suddenly all the villains were just right or had a point.
And also had really sad backstories and Naruto talked
Yeah,
about it.
so while I mean like or also like they're already just married. So like I love Zabuza, but he's married to Haku.
Oh, yes.
Like
Baby.
I love Deidara, he's married to Sasori. So like I think that's probably one of the only reasons why there aren't more like Naruto villains on here because I love these characters, yeah,
Mm.
but like they're married.
Yeah,
Like
but
they're
again, I don't want to screw them. I just want them to
yeah,
get along with
like
each other. Like that is the. I
like
also
there is
realized I just completely left Obi Tobi Dara out of this. Like I forgot that he existed.
because we don't need to
Yeah,
talk
we don't
about
talk
him.
about that.
Right.
No.
So like I think that was one of the other issues with Naruto is that like they just reached a point where like everyone either just had like a sad backstory or they were just correct. So it's just like okay. But like
Mm.
or yeah, they're just married. Like Zabuza is just married to Haku. Like yeah, there was a part of me that wanted to fuck Zabuza because I have a problem and daddy issues. But
But
like that's a married man.
yeah, and I stand by what I said. I still think because Sabuza and Kisama obviously knew each other from before because they were
They
both in
did.
the
Yeah.
swordsman thing. And I feel in my heart of hearts that they were having a twink off. Like they just both found
For
like
whatever
the
reason,
prettiest
for whatever
young
reason,
dude.
I immediately imagine that like fucking Beyblade. That's the funniest thing in my mind right now. Uh,
Ah. No, but I just
okay.
feel like, yeah, no, they would just present them to each other, and then Kisama would be because Itachi was like he's like 17 years old, and Kisama's
Right.
like, oh, this is my boyfriend, this is Itachi, he's 17, and then Sama's like, this is Haku, he's
Like,
15.
this is my child. This is my child that I happen to put my dick in. Um,
Mm.
all right. This one is a shock to absolutely no one. Vicious from Cowboy Bebop.
Not that you didn't allude to this earlier in this very long episode.
Not our longest yet, but it's getting there. Uh, but
Go
all of it
figure.
good.
Mm.
So Vicious is, I think, one of the first characters that I remember. Like, I think it was like him and some of the like homunculi and villains from Full Metal Alchemist who did not make a appearance on this episode on this list. Mostly just because of again they end up either having sympathetic backstories or are just correct. Um, but Vicious was one of the earliest characters that I remember of like dark character, dark desire.
Mm.
Like the relationship that I wrote for him in an OC was intensely abusive. I guess that was me working through some stuff, but it was meant to set up a relationship that was, I think, at the time, like, was Spike Endgame, but only as a replacement for Julia. Like, there's no love here. It's just this female character is replacing Julia, and everyone knows it. Um, but I've always loved Vicious. Again, a character who is so clearly just Vicious to me is an amalgam of every character trope of I have so many questions and I want none of them answered. Like he has lived such a rich and complex life that you see tantalizing glimpses of. Like he served on Titan with Gren. You were a soldier in this weird Lawrence of Arabia war. You know, he was a part of he was a part of the syndicate with Spike. How do you get there? Why does he have a giant demon bird? Why is everyone else using guns and he's using a fucking sword? Like, I have so many questions about Vicious, and I want none of them answered. I think we talked about this last episode and in the live with Antique Bakery that sometimes there's this desire to overstuff, to over explain. And I think Vicious is one of those amazing characters that I have so many questions, I want none of them answered. Because he is so much more compelling to me as someone who doesn't make any fucking sense. Yeah, he served in this weird Lawrence of Arabia war with Gren, and then framed Gren for treason, started dealing drugs in the syndicate, murdered most of the heads of the syndicate, fell out with Spike over Julia. He has lived 50 lives, and all of them are fascinating, and I want him to hurt me.
And I'm sure he would.
He would. He's a misogynist. He would. Like, I think he was one of, like, I think he was the moment where, like, I think I was at first reflexive about the types of characters that I like, because I went through this phase where I was shipping myself with a lot of characters that were horrible, and I don't think I examined it until I got to Vicious. Because all of the horrible characters that I was willing to ship myself or OCs with, I could find something redemptive in it. I couldn't find anything redemptive in Vicious. Wow. I could even find something redemptive in Tucker.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Listen, he is a brilliant scientist who is being held by the conventions of his time. Sometimes you have to do really, really, really insane things to make progressive leaps. And this is the military's fault. He's under a fascist regime that is demanding progress at an inhuman speed. It's so funny because I remember you mentioning it's like you'd be great at politics. And I feel like people increasingly now are aware that, like, yes, I was on the debate team because I'm literally Hanabata. I am literally just Hanabata. Like, I use that power for evil all the time, and now you all are aware of it. But yeah, Vicious was just one of those early characters of, like, you're evil. There is nothing redemptive about you. You hate Spike, and I'm here for it. Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the same character listed twice.
What?
Because Sephiroth is just the same thing.
Listen, Sephiroth.
He's the same thing.
Maybe. And also, he's not. I mean, I don't know Vicious that well, at least, because I think I've only seen the film, not the series yet.
What?
I can't remember. I I don't know. But yeah, no, Sephiroth had to go on the list, even though I will argue that he is. It's not his fault. He's you know. I don't really know what he's doing.
You know what he's doing.
What
do you mean you don't know what he's doing? You know what he's doing.
He has his reasons, and I'm not entirely sure I understand them all the time. But, you know, you would be disturbed if you found out that your mother was actually some alien calamity and that you were created in a lab. And, you know, he's gone through a lot. But for me, it was, I love Final Fantasy VII. I really do. And
can I confess something?
Yes.
I've never played any of the Final Fantasy games.
You haven't?
I haven't.
Oh, but 7 is so good.
Sure.
I played some of them. Like, I played 6, 7, some of 8. I played 9 and 16. A little bit of 12. But yeah. No, but Sephiroth, the thing for me, like, when I was in my teens, like my boyfriend at the time, this was his favorite game, so he would play Final Fantasy VII all the time. And then in 2005, Gone World, Advent Children, they were going to release the Advent Children movie. And like up until the film came out, we just watched the trailers religiously. And I just remember, the first trailer that has like that little Sephiroth teaser at the end. And we were like, oh my God, he's going to be in the movie. It was completely insane. But Sephiroth has that one thing that none of us were immune to in the early 2000s, and it is
long hair and a sword.
Long silver-haired man
Long hair and a sword
in the fucking leather. Like, that man is sex on legs, and I don't care if he's trying to destroy the planet. And then on top of it, he's obsessed with Cloud. And do you know what I saw the other day? Like, this sent me spiraling. Like, I see a lot of dumb takes on Twitter, like the kids today, they're completely lost. But I pre-ordered the second installation of the remake the other day. And I had just finished watching, I don't know, there was this thing, and I think it was like from Tokyo Game Show, so I'm not entirely sure, because it wasn't in the trailer, it was just like some cinematic that they had at Tokyo Game Show. And the first time I saw it, it didn't have any audio, it just had the subtitles. And then the second time I saw it, it had audio, but it was the English audio. And anyone who knows a little bit of Japanese and who have played Final Fantasy with Japanese audio and English subtitles know that the English subtitles, they usually are based on the English script, which is not the same as what they're saying in the Japanese script, which is fucking wild. And so I'm not entirely sure what he says in Japanese, but there is this clip. Cloud is standing with his back turned. Sephiroth is coming up behind him like the stalker that he is, because that's what he does. And he goes, "You're shaking." And then Cloud is like, "I'm excited." And then Sephiroth replies, "You're like a puppy." Naturally, the comment section is like insane, right? But then I see this gem. Someone comments, "Oh wow, they're really gonna start shipping them now." Now? And
I don't even know this franchise, and I'm like, now?
And then someone replied to this tweet with another tweet, and they were like, "I wouldn't be surprised if they were shipping them back in 1997. I have Dojins from 1997. Do you know what I own, Amanda? I have a Dojin. I have a Cloud and Sephiroth Dojin from the year 97, made by our Lord and Savior, Murakami Maki. And it is my prized possession.
I quit. I quit the podcast.
And no, but I love him. He's awful, and he wants to destroy the planet, and he's wearing leather, and he has long hair, and he is a pyromaniac. And there's the sea. Oh no, I love him. Case closed. Like, I love him. He's beautiful and I love him.
Fun fact: I can ask Carola about her day, how she's feeling, but all I need to do is get her to talk about fictional bad men, and then she'll actually talk. I can't get her to express her feelings in a way that makes sense. But if I ask her about Ken Porsche or one of her weird fictional men, I can get her talking for 30 to 45 minutes.
But because who cares about me? I'm not even interesting.
I think you're interesting.
Also, you know how I'm doing. I'm out of battery constantly. Like,
yeah, I know how you're doing.
I don't care.
You're not online. You're doing something else.
I think I'm dead. I genuinely think I am dead.
Yeah, I know what Curl is doing, not reading Discord.
I really am not. All
right. I am going to start this list wrap up with a character that is not in any way shocking to anyone, which is Lord Sasuke Aizen.
Did I call you out on that one?
No, because you're just right.
Yeah.
Again, character that I've loved since I was very young. Another villain who's just overpowered, a megalomaniac, entirely full of himself, surrounded by gay minions, and doesn't have a fucking point.
Well, I'm glad one of us put a Bleach villain on the list, because there should be a Bleach villain on the list.
Ryuken Ishida?
What?
Lydia's dad.
No, yeah, no, but you
Is
put
he-
you put ice in.
I
That's
know, but like, like we should have listened to Villain. Yeah, Ryuki Nishida.
yeah, no,
The
yeah. But
monster.
I was like, I was thinking about Grim or Ulk, but I don't know if they're actually villains.
Okay. Don't refer to them by their Twitter ship nicknames.
What?
Like, that makes it better.
I referred to them like that since the live journal era. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Fuck
It's a
off.
very it's
I'm over
anyway.
here. I'm over here referring to Eisen as Lord Eisen. You will put some respect on those assholes' names.
No,
But
yeah,
a perfect like 2000s villain where he doesn't have a point. He doesn't
he's
need a
awful.
point. He's just awful.
I
And
hate that
like I I love him so much. And like and truly perfect in the way that like there's nothing redeemable about him. I don't think he wants redemption. And I think he's so emblematic of what was at the time great about Bleach is
man.
that they still can't kill him. They can bind him, but he's still fucking around somewhere. Like, he is so vastly overpowered. He is such a fucking threat. And, like, I think so many narratives lack that. Where here is someone who is just an existential threat to the series. Because, yeah, they don't kill Eisen. They can't kill Eisen. No one can kill Eisen. They can take away some of his power, but by the end of it, after him almost wiping out all of the captains and most of the visors, the most they can do is bind him. And he's still dicking around in a dungeon somewhere. And they still have to ask him questions about things because he's the only one who has answers. I miss series that have existential threats like that. Like,
Mm.
Eisen is a threat to every aspect of every character in Bleach. He's not just a threat to the Soul Society. He's not just a threat to humans. He's not just a threat to Vizards or Quincy's. He is a threat.
Mm.
And you have to put everything aside. People have to come from across the aisles to be like, this is a problem. And I wish more series did that because I feel like that's one of the big issues that I have with a lot of modern shonen is that, yeah, like a lot of the villains are just right. And it feels almost weird killing them off or depowering them because they make some good points.
Mm.
Eventually, when My Hero Academia ends in an unsatisfying manner, it is going to be with Izuku destroying Shigaraki, who is just at this stage, and this isn't a spoiler or anything, is just correct. Everything about the Hero and Public Safety Commission should fall. He's just right. But it's going to end in a shitty way because it's a shitty shonen.
Oh my god.
And I hate that because it's going to take the character that is honestly has the best ideas with the least good looks and has to turn them demonstratively more terrible because they wrote themselves into a hole. And then you have someone like Eisen who's wrong about everything. We don't know why he feels this way. He just knows he's better than everyone else and is going to make it everyone's problem.
Mm.
I love that like unabashed big dick energy. He's like, I am literally God and I'm going to be God and no one's going to stop me. I love that man. Love that weird man.
Fair.
Oh, and his like and his gaggle of gay sidekicks.
I do love the gay sidekicks. I do.
He has a bunch of gay sidekicks.
I love them.
I
I
don't.
do love those.
It's always so weird because like that's one of those characters that it's like when people are like, oh, there's obviously like you could ship him and like Captain Ichimaru. I'm like, I don't think that Eisen would have sex. Just I think that he's so imperious that like I can't imagine him like degrading himself to that level.
Hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to shame anyone. I can absolutely like imagine a universe where he is dicked down Ichimaru, Izuru. Like, I can imagine that world, but
No,
Like
but you're making a fair point.
he's just one of those characters. I can't imagine like he let himself get dirty like that. It's
Hmm.
also one of the reasons I don't really put Byakuya with anyone because I feel like he's like on a very similar like imperious level.
Bjorn, my love.
I
No!
mean, I also
They're
just don't like that
married!
hair.
They're
No,
married!
no, he is married to a corpse or his sister. Anyways,
Listen, disclaimer.
disclaimer.
My final entry. I also do
It's
have an
been
honorable
two and a
mention.
half
Yes.
hours.
Okay.
Now we want a disclaimer.
I just want to disclaim this one because I think he's possibly on the list. Not this. I don't know. I don't think he would be on my top 5 like ever list, but he is right now because I recently decided to torment myself to watch the Banana Fish live action stage plays because I was having a good day and I decided to ruin that for myself. So I watched the Banana Fish stage play and I was reminded of how much I love and also hate Yutlung. So he is on the list. Yutlung is an awful little twink. And I like he is objectively a terrible, terrible person. He's awful. I just but he's so pretty. Is that your neighbor's dog?
That is my neighbor's dog.
Oh, hello, dog.
Ugh, I hate it so much.
No, but like you'd like, I think I don't even have like a big. There's not like a big spiel here. It's like I think he's
Mhm.
very pretty, but I also think that he's very evil. Like obviously he has some trauma. Like okay, so your brothers gang raped and murdered your mother in front of you when you were a child, so you decided to get revenge, and I get that.
Yes.
I do understand that. And then I have seen some people on the internet trying to say that, and maybe they're right, that Yutlung kind of, he sees himself in Ash because they have similar backstories, and therefore, he thinks that Ash is also irredeemable. So that's why he's jealous of Eiji because Eiji comes in and like makes Ash
Tries to
better.
redeem him.
Yeah, Yutlung doesn't like that, so Yutlung starts hating Eiji. But I
Mhm.
also think that Yutlung really just wants to fuck Ash, and Eiji is in the way of that. And it makes him horrible. But then there's also that awful scene where Yutlung is trying to get Eiji
Mhm.
sexually assaulted because he takes him. I can't really remember because it's been ages because that wasn't in the play. But all I could think, I mean, yes, this is an awful, awful scene. But
Mhm.
what if Eiji and Yutlung kissed? And then I thought, I am going to hell. But
That's not why you're going to hell. That's not
but
it.
but he is horrible. But I also kind of love him, so I needed to put him on the list because he was very fresh in my mind. A
Mhm.
terrible little twink.
Okay. For the sake of giving us something to do for Patreon and the fact that it's been 2 hours, 37 minutes, we will keep our honorable mentions for Patreon and then later expand it upon further in live
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
because it's been 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Jesus Christ. I'm glad I ate before the recording today.
Yeah, I am too. I'm glad I had that iced coffee while you were running late. That wasn't shade. Carola was
No!
literally running late for valid reasons.
Yeah,
All
thanks
right.
to my mom. Throws mom under the bus.
Throws mom fully under the bus,
Well, she
which
knew I was recording, so,
that's
that's on her.
that's you know what, that's fair and valid, and I can't be angry at that. So I I had to sign into Patreon to see our patrons, and yeah, I forgot how horrible that new logo is.
Oh, yeah, the prostate logo.
I was gonna
Honestly,
I was
that
waiting for
made
you to
it
say it.
better. Yeah, that made it better. But I hate it.
Yeah, there was there, I sent Carola a tweet that was that the new Patreon logo does look like a prostate getting hit by the tip of a dick, and she is and that is 100% correct. That is entirely true, and it is deeply upsetting. All right, so I have patrons queued up so I can thank them properly. Uh, this is the part of the show where we officially thank our patrons, which
Thank you,
are
patrons.
Stephen, Rachel Tanner, Sue, Lucy H, Amora Blue, Persona Nom Gratin, which is still my favorite name, Nabila, Rin, Leslie Isham, Jamie Andreasen, who is still one of our favorite Scandinavians, Lauren Evett, Jay, and Carm. Thank you all so
Woo!
much
Thank you
for
so
supporting
much.
the show. You guys will get your exclusive next week, in which either we watch Ken Porsche and or we talk more about villains. I want to get Kim Porsche out of the way.
I think we should do it for the brain rot because it is
Okay,
literally the brain rot I've lived in
fine. We
for
will
a year.
do Ken Porsche in November, but that means we'll probably do something doubly special for patrons next week then.
Okay.
So, thank you to patrons. If you would like to enjoy the most unhinged version of this series, you can do so at patreon.com/the Yaoi Shelf. Patrons literally got to vote on our Halloween costumes, which we'll be wearing at the end of the month, and get to see behind the scenes glances, including our mascot character that I will probably unveil somewhere around Halloween, because we have questions that we need to ask the creator of said character.
He's very pretty.
He's very pretty. We've been
I mean,
very busy.
He's worth Patreon alone, honestly.
He is worth Patreon alone.
He's so pretty.
So thank you to our patrons. Carola, we've already said this like 30 times. What are we talking about next month?
Fujin brain rot. Do you have it? Because we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about Fujin brain rot, the desire to ship queer characters, and we're honestly going to talk about the good and the bad because I think it's easy to just neg it. I think society's great at that. But also, sometimes we do too much.
I have no idea what you're referring to.
Sometimes we do too much.
What?
So I'm excited to talk about Fujin brain rot.
I'm very excited. Because this is my perpetual state of being.
I mean, it's been my state of being since I was a very, very young grandma.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about it, especially now, like going so many years on, and like honestly, how it's changed and evolved, and some of the early days where like it felt dirty to do stuff like this because of misogyny.
I honestly think we should just name the episode "See, Mom, I told you it wasn't a face," because
just like my bisexuality and being an anime fan in general.
I wonder if there's a correlation.
Being bisexual and an anime fan, yeah,
and having Fujin brain rot.
Obviously, yeah. We had a Fujin pipeline episode. Yes, obviously.
Go watch the Fujin pipeline episode if you haven't.
Yeah, in prep for Fujin brain rot. Carola, where can the good people find us?
You can find us pretty much everywhere. We are on Twitter until Twitter officially goes under. You can find us on Blue Sky and also on Tumblr and on Instagram. We are at the Yaoi Shelf everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes.
And of course, Patreon at the Yaoi Shelf.
Patreon. I am so excited in a couple of weeks because actually, so I just looked at our calendar because I have a bad habit of not looking at our calendar. Carola and I have a shared calendar for the show.
Yeah.
Because we're professionals. So actually, our Patreon episode isn't until the 22nd, but our Q1 meeting is next week.
Yes.
So if you guys have guests that you want to see on the show, if you want to be on the show, if you are a brand that wants to collaborate with us, now is the time to get in our ear as we're starting to make our schedule for Q1. Because we have our list of people that we really want on the show, but that list obviously is open. We have a year's worth of content that we need to fill. So if you've been listening to the show for a while and you're an artist, creator, fellow podcaster, and you're like, hey, I really want to get on this show, now is a great time to drop us an email, which is theyaoishelf@gmail.com, or to reach out to us on social. There is never a bad time to reach out to us because, as Carola knows, I'm a shameless whore when it comes to promoting. But this is an ideal time to do so as we start building out what the first half of our new year looks like. So thank you guys for being here so much. I think this actually now might be our longest episode.
Jesus Christ.
And about villains.
But that's not very shocking. That is actually very on brand.
It is incredibly on brand.
And if anyone has any, any topics or manga or anything you want us to discuss, please let us know and
Yeah,
we'll see what we can do.
absolutely. Let us know who your favorite villain is in
Oh
ye
yeah.
old comments. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Happy
Yes.
spooky month.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.